All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Carey with Church of the Eternal Logos. And today we're going to be reviewing a few conversations between Tucker Carlson and Colonel Douglas Macgregor. This is going to be concerning the Ukraine-Russian war, Israel-Palestine, what it seems to be emerging into a new or third world war. And of course, we're going to conclude with Tucker's latest interview with a gentleman describing the arrest and restraint of Orthodox Christians within Ukraine and essentially the banning of the canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church under the Moscow Patriarchate. So this is what we're going to be doing today. It's going to be a bit of a fun, relaxed, laid-back stream today where I'm not going to be doing too much of an opening monologue to get started. Really want to just kind of dive into, because we got about a couple hours of videos to get through, or at least an hour and a half of videos to get through. So should be a fun stream. And the reason why I wanted to do this is I've been following Colonel Douglas Macgregor, and I think he's been one of the best voices in regards to, again, the Ukraine-Russia situation. The Slavic world is sort of his expertise, so he knows quite a bit about it, as well as what's going on in Israel and Palestine. Obviously, this is a huge, we've already see, it looks like American boots are on the ground already in Israel. And we just had a men's meeting at my parish last night where we talked a little bit about, we were talking about theology and everything. And then I started discussing a little bit about the situation in Israel and Palestine from an Orthodox Christian perspective, where I think one of the things that I highlighted is the royal path that we as Orthodox Christians sort of walk is the protection of innocence. So the men's meeting afterwards, people went, shot guns at a gun range. But again, the defensive nature of Orthodoxy allows us to defend innocence. And especially if you're a householder or you're called to get married, you are essentially martyring yourself in the protection of others. And so we were tying this to, how does an Orthodox Christian perceive the whole Israel-Palestine thing? And obviously Palestine, 10% are Orthodox Christians. And we saw St. Porphyrios, the church there in Gaza, being blown up. From my understanding, 18 families were in the rubble, and that Israel targeted the third oldest Orthodox church, or just the third oldest church in Christendom, and blew that up. And on the same day, I believe they also blew up a mosque. And so I've seen online, just highlighting in this meeting, I'll just stay there. People were understanding how, what exactly are the religious tensions between the Jews and the Muslims. And I was highlighting, as an Orthodox Christian, Jews are sort of characterized by their rejection of Jesus Christ, and that they believe the Messiah hasn't come. And I was highlighting how for an Orthodox Christian, we obviously believe God had already incarnated, and that this would mean that the Messiah to come for Jews is the Antichrist for Christians. And I was trying to discuss how exactly then do we have such a large swath of Christians in America that are basically all gung-ho and believe that the state of Israel, which was founded in 1948, is the same thing as the biblical Israel they read about in the Old Testament. These are not the same thing. And I highlighted, anybody worth their salt in theology would know this, but I don't know if you guys just saw the new Speaker of the House is a Bible-believing Christian. And as soon as he gets voted into the speaker's position, what's his first priority of business? To make sure that we fund Israel in their holy war, because he believes, and he's explicit, that the Israel today, the state of Israel, is the same thing as the biblical Israel. Now, again, as an Orthodox Christian, we don't believe that, because Israel is a term given to Jacob, again, with those who wrestle with God, wrestling with the covenant, first covenant given to Moses. So Israel are the true believers who are upholding the covenant with God. Christ is the second covenant. He fulfills the law. He's the perfect one. He's the only Jew to fully uphold the law, and in so doing ends that tradition and begins a new one where, again, the distinction between Jew and Gentile is dissolved. Those who then rejected Christ as the Messiah maintained their identity, and this is what would be defined Talmudic and Rabbinic Judaism. So I was highlighting that, and then also explaining to people, well, what's the Muslim angle in all this stuff? Well, Islam is inherently a sort of globalist eschatological worldview where it's going to pursue global domination. And so what we see here then is the rise of the Ummah. I just watched a video in Russia, I think it was in Dagestan, where a whole swath of Muslims, I mean, large, mass hundreds, stormed the airport in search for what they believed to be a plane that landed from Israel to essentially kill or beat up or harass Jews. And so I was highlighting to the men's group that as an Orthodox Christian, we're kind of caught in between two worlds, right? Are you going to then promote this new World War III, this global framework for the state of Israel, which is really leading essentially to the construction of the third temple and bringing forth what we would consider to be the Antichrist? Or are you in favor of a religion that we would be considered of false, if not satanic, and its pursuit for global domination? There's really no side to stand on other than to defend innocence. And whether it's innocent Jews or whether it's innocent Muslims, certainly we have major disagreements with both groups, but I think this is sort of the way that the Orthodox Christian would find themselves in this situation. So we're going to then be watching videos again of Tucker Carlson and Colonel Douglas Macgregor laying out some of the intricacies of what has led up to this in regards to the political and the military situation. You know, the Ukraine-Russia thing, I mean, I feel bad for Ukraine. They're totally decimated, their male population. You know, the numbers that we've been getting out, oh, Ukraine's on, you know, they're on the go. They're got the Russians on the heels. No, they're not. Not even close. This war has never been close, never was, never will be. You know, pretty soon they're going to have to sign some type of ceasefire or treaty or surrender. It's over. It's over. And we see the same lies. I don't know if you saw, remember the Ghost of Kiev, this Ukrainian fighter pilot who shoots down, you know, what was it, 15 Russian jets or something. As soon as this Israel-Palestine thing, we have the new Ghost of Kiev, but I guess it's the female Ghost of Jerusalem. It's a female soldier of the IDF who kills 40 Hamas leaders. Give me a break. This is propaganda. And it's clearly the propaganda is very, very strong. What's been surprising is to see the amount of resistance regarding Zionism. It seems like if you take the pulse of the internet, Zionism is on a dramatic decline, despite that being the official stance of the regime. You know, even Biden himself is being criticized by his progressive lemmings because he is siding with the state of Israel over Palestine, even though, but from my understanding, many of the weapons and funds that have been sent to Ukraine were then also sold off to Iran, who then Iran sent them over to Hamas to defend themselves or attack Israel, however you want to see it. So it's like, again, we see the U.S. funding both sides of the war. Same thing as the Rothschilds, same things we've seen for the last 200, 300 years in regards to global warfare, economics, this type of thing. So the central banks, we can see what side they're on. And at the same time, even though my heart cries out for Palestinians and the open air prison that they do in fact live in, you know, I'm not exactly in favor of the Islamic Ummah. And for those of you who don't know, the Ummah is just a theological term for the global community of Muslims. The global community of Muslims is called the Ummah. And that's what's really being stirred up here. And you think about the NGOs, often of a particular group of people, flooding Europe with Muslims. Now we see the enemy inside the gates. And I don't mean to say all Muslims are enemies. That's not what I'm saying at all. But we see these protests. We see these demonstrations. Again, even though as an Orthodox Christian, I'm more on the side of Palestine, we shouldn't be siding really on any side of this particular conflict, because really we're sort of caught in the middle, and Orthodox Christians are caught in the middle in Ukraine and Russia. We see Ukraine and Zelensky literally putting to prison monks, abbots of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church for being Russian sympathizers and spies. Give me a break. And we also see them literally banning the official canonical Orthodox Church inside Ukraine. And so think about all the Orthodox brothers and sisters that have died in the last year to 2 years. It's pretty despicable. So that's what we're going to be getting into today. We're going to be diving straight into all these videos. So smash that like, guys. I want to make a few quick announcements that if anybody is looking for some Orthodox items, be them prayer robes, be them icons, be them incense burners, or anything like that, check out orthodoxdepot.com. It's a great Orthodox website, store, retailer here in the United States, here in the Midwest, and you can help out fellow Orthodox Christians by buying your stuff there and put in promo code COTEL. You'll get 10% off. You can help me out. You can get your stuff. It's a win-win all the way around. So check out orthodoxdepot.com. I think that'd be great for anybody, again, looking for some new items to buy in regards to their orthodoxy. So also, if you are looking and you would like to help me out, and you appreciate what I do here, think about becoming a website member. A website membership, we got 3 different types: the Logos subscription, Logos fitness membership, Logos premium membership. And as I told you, join me in my dissertation journey. I'm going to be sharing everything that I do research on, which is totally unrelated to these popular free online streams, is my research concerning articles on transhumanism, books that I'm reading, new papers that I'm writing. I'm going to begin weekly updates for all my premium and really any website membership. You're going to be getting videos, updates every single week, of which I'll be posting one tomorrow on a reading of my dissertation proposal. So then you guys can track and see my entire journey from dissertation proposal to completing the dissertation, having my first book, and having my PhD. So join me in that journey for the next year and become a website member. Also, if anybody would like to sign up for a one-on-one session, you can do so with this link right here. Well, first of all, here's the membership link. Let me share that in the live chat. This is one of the best ways to support my work. Also, if anybody wants to sign up for a one-on-one session, we can do that this Wednesday or any other Wednesday moving forward, or we can find a time convenient for any of us. If you want to dive into any specific topics, we can do so there. And if anybody wants to sponsor a stream, we got a sponsored stream coming up this week on the mystery of the Holy Spirit. I'll be laying out the Orthodox theology and the mystagogy of the Holy Spirit. Shout out to all the stream sponsors. Again, lately there's been quite a few and they've all been great. So thank you guys all so much. If that's something you'd be interested in, check that out right there. Okay, now with that being said, let's get into today's content. So let me pull up the videos. So again, we're going to be backtracking a bit. We're going to be backtracking a bit in regards to in regards to oh crap, hold on. Let me I've got an audio issue. Got an audio issue going on right now. Okay, there we go. Now we got it. Okay, sorry, my fiance had been messing with my equipment as usual, and so I turn on my speaker and it's on her phone. I'm not surprised. So anyways, now we got things situated. Let me pull up Tucker Carlson here, and let's dive into the first video that I want to watch. So again, we're going to be watching a few here. This one in particular is it's 52 minutes, and it's him with Colonel Douglas Macgregor talking about the Ukraine-Russian war. So we're going to begin here to give context. We're going to go through this whole video. Then we're going to watch the recent one he did on talking about Iran, Israel, Palestine, and that situation, which again, even Colonel Douglas Macgregor believes it looks like we're on the precipice of Armageddon, World War III. It certainly seems that way for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. And then I want to conclude with a shorter video, a 10-minute and 15-second video, which the Orthodox, the subverters over at Fordham University, they're upset that Tucker's doing interviews highlighting the banning of the canonical Orthodox Church in Ukraine. We're going to be checking this video out. It's about 10 minutes long. And I see that already some of the Fordhamites are a little bit upset that Tucker's doing this because, of course, they're on the side of the State Department and don't want people to know that the people that they're rooting for are actually anti-Christian. So without further ado, let's get started with this one.
If the Ukrainians can't beat Putin, who will? The answer, of course, will be us. American troops will fight the Russian army in Eastern Europe. That's most likely. And the assumption is we'll win. But will we win? Probably not, says former Army Colonel Douglas Macgregor, a decorated combat veteran who advised the Secretary of Defense in the last administration. The U.S., says Macgregor, is on the brink of a catastrophic war that could very easily destroy us. Few Americans seem to understand that, but they should. Doug Macgregor is now the CEO of Our Country, Our Choice, and we sat down with him recently. This conversation is worth hearing. Doug Macgregor, thanks for joining us. How would you assess and describe?
And before we get started, we got a super chat that came in, and feel free, guys, if you guys want to show some love and support, send in your super chats via Streamlabs or Dono Chat, either one, or if you prefer YouTube, and I'll address those while we go through. So if you have a specific comment, you have a specific concern, a question, send it in and we'll address them as we go, as opposed to saving all the super chats towards the end. Shout out to Boneman538, throws in a very generous $100 super chat to get started. It says Article 3, Article 33, and Article 54 of the Geneva Convention, preemptive rights to defend land and the dispute as to what is occupied versus what is given by God. I wonder what may happen if we continue to divert resources to countries who claim they don't need our help. Yeah, great point. And thank you so much, Boneman538, for the very generous super chat to get started today. God bless you, bro. Hope you and the family are doing well. Thank you very much. But also, for anybody else, feel free to use the Dono Chat or Streamlabs. Both links are present in the video description. Or if you prefer to use YouTube, feel free to use YouTube. That works as well. So let's get back to it.
The state of the war in Ukraine right now?
That's an important question, and not enough people have good answers at this point. I think all of the lies that have been told for more than a year and a half about the Ukrainians are winning, the Ukrainian cause is just, the Russians are evil, the Russians are incompetent, all of that is collapsing. And it's collapsing because what's happening on the battlefield is horrific. Ukrainians now, we think, have lost 400,000 men killed in battle. We were talking about 350,000 a few months ago. Within the last month of this supposed counteroffensive, which was to sweep the battlefield, they lost at least 40,000 killed. We don't even know how many people have been wounded, but we know that probably upwards of 40 to 50,000 soldiers are amputees. We know the hospitals are full. And we know that Ukrainian units at the platoon and company level, that's with anywhere from 50 to 150 to 200 men, are in piecemeal fashion surrendering to the Russians. Not because they don't want to fight, it's because they can't fight anymore. They have so many wounded, they can't evacuate them. And commanders are saying, well, if I can't evacuate my wounded, I'm going to surrender, because otherwise the wounded will die. And so they call the Russians, and they all speak Russian, and tell them on the radio, look, I've got 50, 60 wounded here. I'm going to surrender because I don't want them to be killed. And the Russians from the very beginning have always treated the Ukrainian soldiers very fairly and very gently. And so they know they're not going to be abused or mistreated. They know they can actually be exchanged for Russian prisoners in the future. So they've surrendered. And I think we're going to see this army that we've been spending so heavily on increasingly melt away. And at the same time, as we're talking, if you look at this long banana-shaped strip of territory in southern Ukraine that the Russians control, if you go to the northeastern corner of that, south of this city called Kharkiv, there are major offensive operations taking place there right now. And the Ukrainian forces are being swept away in front of the Russians. And again, all of this happens in a way that is just not reported in the West. And in the meantime, rather than admit that this is a terrible tragedy that should be ended, on humanitarian grounds, if no other, that the killing should stop. As President Trump said, stop the killing. We're going to continue. And this puts the Russians in the unhappy position of marching further west, because from the very beginning, Putin and his advisors were never interested in a war with NATO or the United States. That's why you've had such incrementalism, this slow grind of movement forward, defensive operations for a long period to build up the force, and then continued offensive operations. They have over 300,000 combat troops in reserve in Russia. And I think they're sitting there and not being released to fight because President Putin anticipates the possibility that we will intervene in Western Ukraine. And if we intervene in Western Ukraine, the Russians will be ready for that. And the consequences for us and for NATO will be devastating because we are not ready to fight the Russians.
Why?
Oh, I think the readiness has been on the decline for a long time. You've had an almost steady, uninterrupted decline in the discipline that makes soldiers fight. Discipline is a tough thing. We don't always understand it. Discipline is really a form of habit. And you build those habits over time through repetition, but you also build it under stress, under pressure, so that it sinks in. And then you build cohesion within the framework of those units. You don't build cohesion when you're dividing the force on racial grounds, when you're pushing people who are clearly unqualified up the ranks to command, when you're rewarding people for anything other than demonstrated character, competence, and intelligence. All of those things are demoralizing, destructive to military establishments. The Army and the Marines are suffering with it, so is the Air Force and the Navy. And there's no easy fix. And these cracks, they're just cracks at the moment, will become giant fissures if you go to war.
So you spent the bulk of your adult life as an Army officer, went to West Point, commanded troops in battle. You're a combat veteran, decorated. But you entered the Army right at the tail end of Vietnam.
That's right.
When it was famously at its nadir.
Yes.
How would you compare the readiness of the current U.S. Armed Forces to, say, 1975 at the end of Vietnam?
I think that in terms of morale and discipline, we are close to where we were in the late 70s. We have a lot of people that are confused about what needs to be done. We've lost a sense of what's right. In other words, you don't have people that have served long enough in formations to know what right looks like, so that you can see a battle group, whether it's a battalion size or brigade or larger, and you know what makes things work. You know what it takes to fight in battle. We don't have very many people like that because since 2001, most of the fighting has been on a very small scale against a fleeting enemy. Running around in sandals with an AK-47, relying heavily on explosives, mines to kill and maim Americans. About 87% of our losses were really a result of explosives that came from mines. This is not an army that is accustomed to fighting anybody who can fight back. If I were going to compare it to an army, a better comparison would probably be the French army before the Franco-Prussian War, because the French had fought Mexican bandits, Mexican rebels. They'd fought Arab bandits, Arab insurgents. They'd had a little experience fighting disgruntled, demoralized European troops, Austrians in northern Italy, but they hadn't faced a truly modern enemy. But people were convinced that the French army was the greatest army in the world because they'd fought in North Africa, Indochina, Mexico, all over the world. That war was a catastrophe for France, and that army was decimated in months by a Prussian army that was a modern force, highly disciplined, very competently led, trained, and equipped. So we're not there. We have equipment that is decades old. The tanks that I served on, for instance, when I went to war in 1990, were virtually brand new, state of the art. Those tanks are still out there. They've been rebuilt, but they're not new anymore. They're no longer as capable as they once were. I'll give you a quick example. We have a turbine engine in the M1 A1 series tanks, and that turbine engine burns up as much fuel sitting still as it does moving, because it's a turbine engine. It was designed to be used on an aircraft. We put them into tanks. So that means you've got an 8-hour tank. Every 8 hours, if you're operating, you've got to refuel this thing. This thing also burns fuel at a very, very high temperature, over 1,000 degrees. And there are 40 plus connections around the engine that are very brittle that can easily cause fires if accidentally they touch these little tubes that carry various types of fluid, if they actually touch this engine that's burning so hot. So the engine is so hot that you can track the movement of US Army ground forces with tanks from low Earth orbiting satellites. So if you think you're going to hide or conceal yourself or outpace somebody, you're just a glowing target from space. To this must be added the ridiculousness of not having replaced that engine with a reliable, state-of-the-art diesel electric engine, which is much cooler, which can go for 24 hours or more without a refuel. And these things are extremely problematic when you go to war because you have to pull forces back, refill them, return them to the front. That's not easy to do when you're operating as frequently as every 8 or 6 or 9 hours. They say, well, we put a generator on there to make up for this when you're sitting still. The problem is that you don't sit still for very long in combat, because if you do, you're going to be targeted and destroyed. And that, of course, is what we're seeing in Ukraine. Persistent surveillance from space, from overhead surveillance, makes everything visible all the time. So if you're going to embed yourself in the ground, if you're going to set up a permanent position there where you try to fire from that, you're going to be targeted and destroyed very, very quickly. So that's why this defense right now looks a lot like World War I, because anybody who moves is identified and killed. The only limitation on your ability to target and destroy the enemy is ammunition. The Russians, of course, have no shortages whatsoever. You recall at the beginning of this, we have all these shortages, right? The Russians can't keep up with missiles. The Russians can't keep up with shells. Well, they have multiple manufacturing facilities operating 7 days a week at 24 hours a day. We have no surge capacity in the United States. It would take us many, many months to come up to that kind of standard where we could actually compete in high-end conventional warfare. And that's why people like me and others worry that if we get into a confrontation, that we cannot win, because the world has changed, warfare has changed, integrated air defenses will knock virtually everything that flies out of the sky, that we will then fall back on a nuclear deterrent, a tactical nuclear weapon that says, if you keep advancing, we'll have to use a nuclear weapon. We don't want to go there, because the notion that there are so-called tactical nukes, you've heard that expression?
Yes.
Oh, it's just a little nuke, so that won't precipitate a major war. The use of any nuclear weapon is going to precipitate escalation very rapidly, because your opponents will assume that if they don't use their nuclear weapons, they're going to lose them. So we're living in a terrible dilemma right now. The smartest thing that we can do is end this war.
What is Russia's objective, do you believe? Assuming that objectives change over the course of war.
And before we get into that, I want to highlight, you look at what the U.S. military is doing now. I don't know if you've seen the latest thing of like the TikToks. The Navy now has an official drag show for sailors. There's a whole thing going on about TikTok with all these different soldiers doing these makeup tutorials and show how they're a male soldier during day and then they're a drag queen at night. This is the state of the U.S. military at this point. We see that the Biden administration wants to build fighter pilot cockpits for pregnant women. I mean, what are we doing? This is where at one point in this conversation, I believe, or at least maybe it's another one that I watched, Colonel Macgregor highlights that Russia has a serious plan to have 1.5 million soldiers in the next decade or two. But that's trained military men. Look at the United States, the Army, they're having one of the worst times ever in recruiting, because what exactly are you going to go die for as an American soldier? The globo homo empire, the spread of sexual degeneracy and globalism, the central banks, fiat currency, and to see that soldiers are already on the boots on the ground in Israel, it's pretty sad. It's pretty sad. Guys, smash that like for everybody who's still here. Smash that like, and if you want to show some support, feel free to send in a super chat using Streamlabs or the Dono chat, or if you prefer YouTube, feel free with that.
Of course. Well, the original objective, obviously, was very different. I mean, if they'd made peace with the Russians back in, let's say, March or April, I think the Russians would have retained very little territory, probably only Luhansk and Donetsk, the two so-called breakaway provinces. And I think there would have been guarantees of neutrality for Ukraine and guarantees of equal rights before the law for Russians. And that's what people don't understand. Most of this has to do with abuse meted out to Russians in Ukraine by the Ukrainian government. And this, of course, is this radical nationalist government that came to power in Kiev in 2014. And they almost immediately, as soon as that government came into power, they started launching a war against the so-called breakaway provinces. And Putin kept trying and trying and trying. The Minsk Accords were another good example, trying to get to a solution that would not involve confrontation. Now we know, of course, thanks to Angela Merkel, the German chancellor, that the Minsk Accords were just a ruse, a way to kill time and give the Ukrainians more time to build up their forces. To build up their forces for what? And it's pretty clear they were building up for an offensive against Russia. And of course, the next step was that we bring in our missiles and station them in eastern Ukraine, which puts them in a couple of minutes away from all of Russia's cities and all of Russia's nuclear deterrent. So this was unacceptable. So that original deal is gone now. And the question is, what will the Russians accept? Well, I think they're going to demand that whatever remains of Ukraine, rump Ukraine is what most people are calling it now, most of what's probably west of the Dnieper River has to be neutral. It can't be part of NATO. The Russians will never tolerate NATO forces on Ukrainian soil because we've demonstrated conclusively that we are fundamentally hostile to Russia. So that's the minimal requirement. How that's governed, that's another question. Who knows? I'm sure Moscow would want to have some say in that government and who is there to ensure that behind the scenes they are not once again subjected to the treatment that we subjected to them to in the Minsk Accords.
What is the Ukrainian objective?
I think more and more Ukrainians just want to survive this. And that's becoming very hard. And Zelensky and the radicals around him are basically committed to fighting this war to the last Ukrainian. And of course, I'm sure that Mr. Zelensky and his friends are anxious at some point to retire to their estates in Florida or Venice or Cyprus to collect on the billions that they've managed to steal or siphon from all the aid that we've provided.
And that's what I've seen Ukraine as. It's essentially a money laundering operation. Like I said, from articles that I read, some of the weapons that Hamas used in their invasion of Israel, well, they were given to them by Iran, who got them from Ukraine, who got them from the military aid that we've been sending from the United States. And so, again, we see the United States, like, as I highlighted, the Rothschilds, whether it be World War I or II, funding both sides of the war. Prescott Bush, doesn't matter. It seems to be the same MO. And you know, you can look up articles also of Netanyahu in favor of the funding of Hamas. So how independent is Hamas even from Israel, creating, again, their own boogeyman, just like the CIA and the U.S. created ISIS? Makes you wonder how many, again, the Ukrainian high-end politicians buying, you know, mansions in southern France and Italy and Spain. It's crazy. Well, all this is, again, it's a money laundering operation off the backs of American taxpayers.
Remember, Ukraine is probably one of the most corrupt places in the world. A friend of mine who had spent time in the old Soviet Union and also lived in Mexico came back from a visit to Mexico, and he said, it's hard to believe this, but Ukraine is more corrupt than Mexico.
Wow.
And I think that's true. So this is a world-class disaster. 14 million Ukrainians have left the nation, presumably never to return, because when they're asked in Germany or France or Croatia or Spain or wherever they go, we will never go back. So what are you going to do with this country? And then, of course, we have the usual suspects, the great agricultural business conglomerates, along with BlackRock, who had their eyes on the fertile Ukraine ground in Western Ukraine. I suppose there'll be a big effort to get control of that in some fashion. That may not work, though, once this war ends with a complete and utter defeat of the Ukrainian regime.
Who is Zelensky? Exactly. How would you characterize Zelensky?
Well, Zelensky...
George W. Bush called him our generation's Winston Churchill.
Well, this is W, right?
Yeah.
Not a very thoughtful man.
I love that. I love Colonel Macgregor.
He was a comedian who made a living acting on stage, frequently pretending to be a transvestite, doing things with various body parts that I won't go into. And he was picked up by an oligarch named Kolomoisky. Kolomoisky is the individual is probably more responsible than anybody else for funding this atrocity we call the Azov Regiment that runs around with the swastikas and Nazi gear and so forth. And he was picked and then blessed by Victoria Nuland and the State Department as their man. Now, when he originally ran for office, he ran on a peace platform. And he was overwhelmingly elected across the country because he said, if I am elected as your president, I will make peace with Russia. Ukrainians didn't want to go to war with Russia. They were looking for a way out of this and a resolution to the crisis. Of course, once he was in there, he took a different road. And I can't help but think that that road was defined for him by us.
Who's Victoria Nuland?
Oh, goodness gracious. All these hard questions. I do not know Victoria Nuland personally. I know Fred Kagan, and his brother Bob is married to her. And she's a long committed neocon. This is someone I would not characterize as either Democrat or Republic. These are people with this agenda. And the agenda says until the entire world is garrisoned by U.S. forces and is converted forcibly to some form of democracy that we approve of, the world will not be safe, and we must continue to fight. And I think in the case of Russia, Russia has special appeal because I think these people have ancestors who came from that region of the world and have a permanent axe to grind with the Russians, which of course I don't. I don't think most Americans do, and nor do I think anybody in government should shape policy based on whatever unhappiness their ancestors, experienced in a place like Russia. So that's a nutshell, but I think that's enough. And wherever she goes, usually there is conflict, crisis, and fighting. And she's a strong opponent of fighting to the last Ukrainian.
Does she, do you think, have relevant experience that would qualify her to be in charge of this war?
Well, obviously she does, but it's sort of like asking somebody who has never snaked a drain or replaced a garbage disposal to be a plumber. And I think we have a lot of those in Washington. She's not the only one. So no, I don't think she understands the gravity of the situation. These are the same people. Tony Blinken is in this with, what's his name? Sullivan I keep mixing up Sullivan with the previous O'Brien, who was in the White House. Not much difference. And Sullivan will all tell you, well, the Russians are weak. The Russian economy is fragile. The Russian armed forces are poor. Their generals are terrible. And they can't possibly win. All we have to do is to keep up the pressure and they will collapse. Well, that's been a hell of a strategy. And it's killed large numbers of people and created millions of refugees and destroyed the country, but it hasn't hurt Russia. And Russia today is stronger than it has been in 30 or 40 years. You have a Russian military establishment that is now more potent and more capable than the Russian military was in the mid-1980s.
Why? Wars typically, don't they degrade a military force?
Well, the Russians have been very, very careful and deliberate, very cautious about the expenditure of life.
What do you think the casualty numbers are in Russia?
That's a hard one to estimate. I think probably 40 to 50,000 killed, maybe another 40 to 50,000 wounded.
Wait, total?
Yes.
As compared to the Ukrainian?
400,000 dead. Yeah.
So this is...
The ratio is...
No, again, comprehend that. 400,000 Ukrainians dead, 40 to 50,000 Russians injured / killed. And yet we're being told, again, the propaganda, I know that Ukraine's now out of season and Israel and Palestine is the new trend, but we're being told that, oh yeah, Ukraine's on this new offensive. There's this guy that was on Joe Rogan named Peter Zion, and he's like this global political guru. And it's hilarious because everything he said about the Ukraine-Russian war has continually been wrong. Let me see if I can pull him up so you guys can see who I'm talking about. Peter Zion is something like that. There he is right here. This guy. I watch his videos just especially if it's on Russia, because he hates Russia for some reason. And everything this guy says is the exact opposite of what's happening. Oh yeah, Russia's on their heels. They have maybe more deaths than Ukraine. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? This guy, again, he works for the State Department. He's propped up by the system that is, and he's wrong about every single thing he's ever said about the Ukraine-Russian conflict. It's hilarious. Super chat came in from William. Shout out to William. Throws in $4.99. Says the war is over. Just remove the Hollywood movie sets. You and Bays need to check out Wag the Dog. Yeah, I think we're both familiar with that. But thank you so much, William, for the $4.99 super chat. I mean, the Ukraine-Russian war is over, and I think irony, right, that the IDF allows Hamas to come in during this rave, of which I don't know if you guys saw the intelligence agencies for Egypt, surrounding areas, I believe Jordan, told Israel, hey, watch out. Hey, watch out. There's an attack plan. And they failed to stop it, right? I've seen even former IDF soldiers say there's no way that they could have got in there without Israeli soldiers knowing exactly what's getting ready to happen. So it looks more to me like Israel allowed this terrorist attack to occur to, again, be a sort of preemptive catalyst for what we're seeing now. Ukraine's fallen out again a favor. They definitely can't win. So now they just repackage it. And it's funny because the same people with their Ukrainian flags now have their Zionist flags. But thank you so much, William, for that. And we had one more super chat come in over on the Dono chat. Shout out to Gary, throws in $10 and says, thank you for all your great work. God bless. Well, thank you, Gary. God bless you. And thank you very much for the support. All right, now let's get back to it.
Was 1 to 5.
You believe those numbers are roughly accurate?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And these are
50,000 to 400,000. That's a larger country, or with a much smaller country with a much smaller military. I mean, that's a grotesque.
Oh, it is. And the manpower is leaving Ukraine as quickly as it can get out because people don't want to be thrown into the meat grinder. You can't defeat what the Russians have built. They were the first back in the 1970s to understand the criticality of linking intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance in space, as well as on land and at sea, with strike weapons. What's a strike weapon? Rockets, missiles, guided artillery for precision. They've done that extremely well. So that's one of the reasons they have thousands of guns, hundreds of rocket launchers, hundreds of ballistic missile launchers, cruise missiles, and so forth. And these are then linked to that ISR. So the response time is almost instantaneous. A Ukrainian formation is located at this spot next to this building on the outskirts of, say, Kharkov. They can have missiles on the way to those targets, or rockets or drones, within the space of perhaps 5, 6, 7 minutes. So this is a very well structured, well organized machine. And the machine is grinding up everything in front of it. And it's not going to be defeated.
What about the space age military technology that we've been sending to Ukraine? That hasn't brought parity?
Well, first of all, a lot of the equipment we send over there is, quite frankly, obsolete. It's very old. It's not new. We've given them a few new items, but not much. And remember what I said about missiles. We sent them some Patriot missiles. And I think at this point in this newest round of money, what, 750 million, something like that, we're sending 33 missiles, Patriot missiles. These are missiles that are used to shoot down aircraft or cruise missiles, incoming opposing forces. Every time in air defense, people will tell you if there's a target out there, you shoot 2 missiles at it as a minimum to make sure you get the target. Well, you run out of our missiles in the space of a few days. 33 missiles will be gone in 2 or 3 days. You can't possibly defeat the thousands of projectiles that are being hurled in your direction. And the radars, of course, emit, and so your radars light up and become targets. This is a no-win situation because the Russians, though they were not prepared in February 2022 for this kind of war, they are now. And they're continuing to prepare, which includes continuous mobilization. They're up to 750,000 troops in and around Ukraine. Most of them are on the outskirts, Belarusia, Western Russia, down in southern Ukraine. That number is going to rise over the next year, I would expect, to 1.2 million. And people are reservists being called out of universities. People have been through the military now, working universities to become engineers, architects, mathematicians, whatever. They're being pulled out, put in uniform, and readied because, again, our intransigence, our demonstrated hatred and hostility for Moscow and for Russia has convinced the Russian people, as well as the leadership in Moscow, that they are going to have to fight us and anyone who is allied with us. So they're preparing for that eventuality. That's why it's so important that we have to wake up, understand what we've done has backfired. Mm-hmm. Whatever we set out to achieve has failed. What we need to do now is stop this and come to a settlement that we may not like, but it needs to happen, and soon, before this thing is out of control. Eventually, you keep this up within the next 6-8 months, you'll see hundreds of thousands of Russian troops on the Polish border. Yep. That is not what we set out to achieve.
No, it's a terrifying disaster. And what cost do you think to the United States? What
the latest estimates since 2001, spending, including the spending in Ukraine, all the military spending designed to support these interventions, conflicts, wars, whatever you want to call them, about $14 trillion. Now, that 14 trillion is largely debt financed. So then you have to move from the 14 trillion to where we stand now in national sovereign debt, which of course I know the economic luminaries think is meaningless. But you have 130 million workers. And you look at those figures and suddenly you realize that every adult male or woman in the United States who works for a living has a debt hanging over them of roughly $240,000 in order to deal with what the 14 trillion have added to the national sovereign debt.
Think about that. Well, we've sent what was it, around 60 to 70 billion to Ukraine. Do you guys remember the catastrophe that happened in Hawaii? And the Biden administration sends them a one-time check of, what was it, $750. So we see drastic inflation here in the United States. The price, the currency, we're seeing the creation of BRICS, the erection of BRICS, and the unification of multiple nations around the world, creating a new global currency. That's when it's hard not to see, again, Palestine, Israel, Ukraine, Russia. This is about the central banks. This is about globalism. This is about, again, a new world order. That's really what this is entirely about. And unfortunately, as an American, I and my country is on the wrong side of history. I don't want to be fighting for the things that our country is currently fighting for. And it's pathetic. There's not a whole lot to be proud about being an American right now.
And this is part of the issue, that people are walking away from this war for good reasons. Look, the average American earns about $31,000 a year. That's it. The average American pays about $16,600 a year. Now, the people in Congress, this doesn't affect them, or in the Hill or inside the Beltway. We're talking about the real Americans who live out there scratching out a living. Keep in mind that a person who works all his life and then tries to draw on Social Security can expect a monthly payment of probably $1,400 if they're lucky. $1,400. We hand every alleged asylum seeker, illegal migrant pouring into the border in Texas or wherever else, we hand them, when they get there, $2,200. And we put them on that $2,200 diet from there on out per month. Yet somebody who works all his life, retires and draws Social Security, gets $1,400. The Afghans who were hanging on to the planes in Kabul trying to come to the United States, when they arrived, they received $2,200 a month. Now, if you can make sense out of this, please try, because I don't think most Americans can make sense out of this at all. And that's one of the reasons people have said, not because they know anything about Ukraine. Most Americans don't. If they knew anything about the history of Eastern Europe, they would all say, get out. Because the wars and the blood and the hatred that have been characterized to that part of the world for hundreds of years is something we can't sort out. We can't fix it. We shouldn't try to arbitrate it. We don't know anything about it. We shouldn't be in this, is the bottom line. I think Americans have figured that out. But now they're beginning to look at the numbers and the figures, and they say, What happened to consent by the government? Instead, we have contempt for the governed. Whatever the governed want, they don't get. Who gets it? Well, the donors get what they want. Now, somebody was joking the other day and said, Doug, if the donors were cannibals, they'd feed the American people to them. That's the attitude in Washington, D.C. What's the donor want? Give me more money. It's a catastrophe. It's the destruction of our whole republic. I don't think people realize how far gone things are. A lot of Americans sense it, and I think we're on the path to some sort of national come to Jesus moment, where we're tired of being the contemptibles. We want to have a say in what our government does, and we really don't have it.
You mentioned the donors, and we just had a conversation with Vivek Ramaswamy running for president, Republican side. He's rich, and so he doesn't need big donors. But he has said publicly that he can't get money from any big-time Republican donor because his position on Ukraine is similar to yours. He doesn't buy the NBC News version of the Ukraine war. Why are donors on both sides so attached to a war that's clearly hurting the United States?
Well, first of all, you've got to go through and identify the donors. What's their background? Where did they come from? And why do they feel the way they do? I think there are more personal issues here than we realize with many of them. Secondly, you have to look at the monetary benefits to them. If they're it's not just being heavily invested in the defense industry. You've seen that report from the Oakland Institute, which talks about arable land in Ukraine, the breadbasket of Europe, some of the richest, most fertile soil anywhere in the world. A friend of mine who's Ukrainian said all you have to do is take an old boot, stick it in the ground in Ukraine, come back in 6 months, and something grows. The boot's transformed into something you can eat. He said that's how fertile this is. So there are people that are interested in getting control of it, oligarchs. They call them oligarchs in Eastern Europe. I'm starting to think that we should talk about oligarchs in the West,
Of course,
because they're also invested in this. They have an interest in it. So that's part of it. Then, of course, you have
and that's exactly why you look at the Burisma deal. You look at the Hunter Biden, China-Ukraine connections. We definitely have oligarchs, probably not as intelligent. It seems like on the West, everybody's so incompetent, but that's exactly what the Biden family is. They've been selling their influence. That's exactly what Hunter Biden said. That's the family business, right? The family business is literally selling political influence to donors around the world to do whatever they want to do. It's traitor. They're traitors. It's traitorism. And we know what we used to do to traitors, but of course, our country's so corrupt, so inept, so inverted. I mean, people are more upset about transgenders and them being able to be fully represented. We got Rachel Levine. We have the health administrator for the United States as a man pretending to be a woman. Sad times. Guys, smash that like for everybody who's here. And also, if you want to show some love, feel free to send in a super chat using the Streamlabs link or the Dono chat link. Both are in the video description. Or if you prefer to use YouTube, feel free to use that as well.
The advantages of people on the Hill. You have somebody like McConnell who says, we're so fortunate that we're doing so much damage to the Russians. This will set them back for 10 years. They've lost all this equipment. The Ukrainians have done a great job. Well, of course, all that's a lie. That's a blatant falsehood. And then he follows up by saying, and we're offloading equipment so that we can replenish with newer equipment. Well, unfortunately, the new equipment we're going to buy looks an awful lot like the old equipment. So you're not necessarily getting new top-of-the-line material. You're just getting new versions of what you've already got, which, of course, is what Congress wants. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that doesn't prepare you for a future war because your probable opponents are investing in very different capabilities from the ones that you have. And remember, again, all the things that we once monopolized, all the precision, all of that's lost now. Everybody has it. There's nothing that we can do that they cannot also do in Moscow, in Beijing, and probably in many other countries that we don't even know about yet. But of course, it all means money. Where does the money go? Does it go into the Defense Department? Sure. But then it's transferred over into industry. And industry then contributes money to PACs. And the PAC money goes where? Back to the Hill. So it's a wonderful sort of recycling machine where the wash is washed again and again. Now, what happens in Ukraine? Well, the equipment shows up. Some of the equipment reaches the troops. A lot of it is sold off, ends up in arms bazaars like Kosovo, or we see it now being used by the drug cartels. We saw somebody working for one of the major cartels that is also involved in human trafficking walking around with a Javelin missile. The whole kit. Well, where did that come from? Well, it came from Europe. Probably may have gone from Europe to Afghanistan, Europe to North Africa, Europe to the Balkans, and then over into the United States, south of the border.
You can't be the only person who spent your life as an Army officer who's reached these conclusions. Like, what are they thinking at the Pentagon? There have to be people who've come to the same positions.
Tucker, we have right now, I think, 43, could be 44. It's usually 43 or 44, 4-star generals and admirals. You have to think about that. We have a force of 1.1.
It seems like a lot.
Well, let me explain just how much it is. We have 1.12 million people in the armed forces. In other words, you add up all the armed services, that 1.12 million. In World War II, at the height of the war, end of 42, beginning of 43, when we had 12.2 million men under arms, we had 7 4-stars. 7 4-stars. I can tell you who they were. You had George Marshall, Chief of Staff of the Army, Douglas MacArthur commanding in the Pacific, Eisenhower commanding in Great Britain and in the European theater, Hap Arnold for the Air Force. Unofficially, he was the vice chief, but he was effectively commanding the air forces. And then you had Leahy, who was in the White House, Admiral Leahy as the liaison officer. He was effectively the unofficial chairman of the Joint Chiefs for FDR. Then you had Nimitz and King. King was the CNO, and Nimitz commanded the Pacific. Now, somehow or another, with only 7 4-stars, we managed to survive the greatest, most destructive war in history, and fortunately end up on the quote-unquote winning side. Now we are blessed with 43 to 44 4-stars organized into multiple commands designed to blanket the globe with American military power and interest. I think it borders on lunacy, especially since we don't live in the world of 1920, 1945. This is the 21st century. Today, if you have forces forward, they're easy to identify, easy to target, easy to destroy. So what's the point of having a lot of forces forward? Well, we can always reinforce them. No, you can't. How do you get across these vast oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific, when your opponents have submarine fleets? How many ships do they have to sink? Supply ships, transports, before everybody says, that's it, we're not going. Same thing true for aircraft. Well, we have better aircraft. We may have better aircraft, but we don't have very good air defenses. We've neglected air and missile defenses for years. In the Army, they always treated theater air and missile defense as sort of the redheaded stepchild because we haven't fought anybody that compelled us to defend ourselves from missile and air attack. Well, those days are over. In other words, if you press this war with Russia in Central East Europe, it will reach us here in the United States. People aren't thinking about that.
How many Americans do you think are assisting or fighting on the side of Ukraine right now?
Well, I don't know, but I imagine it must be hundreds because the president of the United States, as you know, has authorized combat pay for Americans in uniform in Ukraine. Now, didn't specifically say uniform, just said Americans serving in Ukraine. So I imagine large numbers are in other uniforms, not necessarily American. Some may be assisting contractors or working with them, but a substantial number. And again, thus far, the Russians have been very careful about not necessarily targeting them. And it would be a mistake to assume that the Russians don't know where they are. And the latest strikes that we've had over the last couple of months have been all the way out on the border with Romania, the border with Poland, the border with Moldova. Precision strikes, Kinshal missiles carrying 1,000-pound warheads. Great accuracy, very destructive. Why? The Russians are sending a message. If you think you're going to hide from us if you come in here, you're not going to do that. If you cross these borders, we will annihilate you. You'll never get to the Dnieper River. We won't permit it. And we need to come to terms with these realities because we can't defeat it. And see, this is the sad part. Somebody will say to me, well, Doug, you don't sound very patriotic. No, I'm not patriotic. I put my life on the line for the country. I have no compunction about fighting or killing anybody if we need to do it. Don't get me wrong. We don't need to do this. That's the point. This is unnecessary.
So I think a lot of Americans suspect that maybe our military force is weaker than we think it is. You're saying it's much weaker than we think it is.
Oh, yeah. Think of it like an engine. You have a 500 horsepower engine in 1991, and the 500 horsepower engine goes from 500 to 400 to 300 to 200 down to 100. Now, you don't notice very much because you don't put the pedal to the metal. It's good enough to get to the grocery store. It's good enough to drive on 95 for 50 miles. But if you put your foot down the pedal, you're going to discover that this is a very weak engine. It's not performing very well. It doesn't have what it once had. In other words, we've gone down in the horsepower arena militarily. This is the warning. This is what people need to understand. People say, well, what about all the money we spent? That's a damn good question. Spend all this money, what are you getting for it? Where did the money go? Who's making the decisions? And you have separate services. Each service lives in its own world, has its own doctrine, its own bureaucracy, its own way of war. All this jointness is just, fugazi nonsense. And you got lots of generals, and every general has a reason to exist. And every general has 1,000 men in his headquarters, every 4-star. And every 4-star needs money for his projects. And this becomes a giant trough feeding frenzy for people on the Hill. And nobody ever bothers to stand up and say, why? What are we doing this for? You just look what's happening in Africa. Niger decided they'd had enough of their French overlords. The French retained ownership of virtually 50% of everything of value in their colonies in Afrique du Nord. Now, that's French business. Whatever the French want to do, it's fine with me. But my point is, we're involved there because we built an airstrip in Niger and we marched in there to defeat Islamists. The truth is, there weren't very many Islamists until we showed up. Now there are lots of Islamists. What's wrong with that picture? And now it turns out the whole population, in addition to hating the French, has decided they hate us. So we've had a coup in Niger. It's now being backed by the Algerians, as well as the neighbors. And people are saying, well, we trained them. We gave them assistance, and they're turning on us. Oh, it must be the Wagner mercenaries. There are any Wagner mercenaries in the place. In other words, that we may have gone in there and blown it on our own, made mistakes of our own, backed the wrong horse, whatever you want to call it, doesn't occur to anybody. Well, it must be those Russians, or maybe those pesky Chinese. We have this unfortunate habit of seeing ourselves as always wearing the white hat, always doing everything right, and we miss the truth. And the truth is, soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines do what they're told. They'll go wherever you ask them to go. They'll put their lives on the line. But it doesn't always make sense. And sometimes it may be for profit, not for national interest, not for the interests of the American people. And that's the problem. And no one's been watching this thing. They see the flag, everybody salutes, everybody listens to the music, everyone's enthralled. But the old 500 horsepower engine is gone. We're down to 100 horsepower, and 100 horsepower engine is trying to make it all over the world. It's not going very well. And we haven't even talked about our economy, obviously.
And before we continue on, we got a few super chats that came in. Guys, smash that like for everybody who's here. I want to thank everybody for being here. Special thank you goes out to First Person Q, gifted a COTEL Crew membership here on YouTube. God bless you, brother. Thank you very much. And shout out to Dr. Crispy Rothschild for renewing his membership. He said, smash that like button and subscribe, everyone. Truly appreciate that. And Ghostios throws in $2 and said, God bless you and everybody on this stream, David. Well, thank you very much, brother. Really appreciate your support as well. And over on Dono Chat, we had a super chat come in of $5 by an anonymous donor. So thank you very, very much, anonymous donor, for the $5 super chat. Again, we're going to get back into it. I don't want to break up the rhythm of everything. So smash that like, guys. And if you want to show some love, please send in a super chat using Streamlabs or Dono Chat or YouTube, whatever you prefer. And also, if you would like to support, one of the best things you can do is become a website member. Here is the link to become a website member. I would greatly appreciate that for everybody. So God bless you all. Thank you very much. And we will get back to it. Let's go.
Given all of it, I mean, what you're saying is horrifying. And some of it, with respect, does seem kind of obvious. Almost nobody in the Congress is saying what you are saying. Chris Christie never served in the Congress, but he was a governor. He's been on the national stage for quite a long time. He's running for president now. He recently went to Ukraine to meet with the world's highest paid actor who runs it. I think we have a clip.
I believe that the overwhelming majority of the American people understand that we need to be with Ukraine on this fight.
Do you maintain the current commitment? Do you expand it or do you contract it?
I increase it.
My position on Ukraine, which is that we haven't done enough. And that while I think that President Biden has certainly done better than President Trump, and President Trump did better than President Obama on this, we still have more to go. We can spend this money now and have Ukrainian soldiers fight our war, or we can spend a lot more money and American blood later to fight in Taiwan.
How do you respond to that?
When we were in Vietnam, I was 16, and I remember General Westmoreland telling everyone, if we don't fight these people in Vietnam and to fight them here, we'll be fighting them in Los Angeles and in all our major cities. So we have to stay here and win this, or that's what's going to happen.
A lot of them did go to Los Angeles and build private businesses, actually, in the end.
Well, my hat's off to them. That's fine. I have no problems with that. But I think it's a lot of nonsense. It's the same thing with Ukraine.
But Chris Christie's not stupid. He's very dishonest, obviously, but he's not stupid.
Well, he has donors.
That's what that is.
Of course. Where's he going to get his money? Well, there, Governor Christie, we want this war in Ukraine. We want to see that man Putin removed. We got to get rid of him and his regime. Why? Well, it's not democratic. Most of the world is not democratic. There are a lot of people that don't think we're very democratic anymore.
We're not.
So who are we kidding? I think Americans are waking up. And Christie is probably there for name recognition and more money, but I don't see him winning anything.
No. But he does, I mean, in a blusterier way, he's expressing the same thing that the rest of them, Nikki Haley and all the rest.
Well, doesn't this also divert attention from far more serious matters here at home? It really does. What does it cost Christie to say, we have to beat those Russians? Nothing. It doesn't cost him anything. It costs the country a great deal in terms of money, prestige. What Fitch just downgraded our credit worthiness one more time. And people say, oh, it's not a problem. The bond yields are on their way up and prices are on their way down. When is the Treasury bond fire sale going to happen? When do banks offload these Treasury bonds that they bought when they were at zero interest because they're now worthless? What's going to happen in China, in Japan, in Saudi Arabia, where they have lots of bonds? I mean, we're fragile. We're vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Nobody even mentions it because nobody wants to fess up and tell the truth. We've overreached. We're running on fumes.
Yep.
What about this economy? What are we building? What are we producing? That's what made us a great power between 1865 and basically 1920. That's when your industrial base was created. That's when you had people like Edison and Tesla, Rockefeller, all these people. They were tough and they were intelligent and they were effective. The only person I see out there now who's remotely like that is Musk. He's building something. He's creating something. When you do that, you create employment. I don't see that happening. High-tech startups, the hell are they? What are they doing for us? A new app on your phone? We've got to wake up and say, oh, well, AI is better algorithms. Better algorithms do not replace human beings, and they don't necessarily create opportunity for people to work. We've got to think this thing through very carefully. We haven't done that. We haven't. What about our energy sector? Oil, gas, we've killed it. We have what, half the refineries we once had? California had something in the neighborhood of 43 or 44 refineries. They're down to 23. You know, how long before suddenly we're in another energy crisis and we need to rapidly refine fuel? Can we do it? Well, the answer is it's going to be tough. It applies, the same thing applies to Raytheon. We want 200 missiles and we want them now. Well, we have no surge capacity. There's no excess capacity built into anything. What are we going to do with this scientific industrial base? What about our agricultural sector? What are we doing for that? I mean, high-end manufacturing is dead. We need to repatriate lots of industries. That's what President Trump talked about. We absolutely need to do that. People say, well, we want free trade. Well, I'm 100% for free trade as long as it doesn't kill us. But if it kills us, then I'm for protection.
And that's what we see with our government. That's why they've shut down oil production. We got to buy our oil from the OPEC nations. Meanwhile, they can control and distribute it how they want, raise prices accordingly. That's going to affect the entire middle class of every nation around the world. We see that the farmers now, the U.S., the FDA, what they want to put mRNA jabs inside of all the cattle and the beef, because they say, oh, well, the Americans, they're not getting their boosters. They're not getting their jibby jabs. So it looks like we're going to have to put it in their food so that they'll be the subservient sheep that we want them to be. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. There's not, like I said, there's very little right now as an American to be proud of. And I appreciate this conversation between Colonel Macgregor and Tucker. And guys, this is just the first one. We're going to hop into this next one here in 10 minutes on Israel and Palestine, because this is episode 18, episode 33. Tucker did with Colonel Macgregor, and that's going to be an update on Israel Palestine. So we're going to get to that in just a moment. So smash that like. I want to give a very special thank you to Frankie D. Throws in 1999 and says, God bless, brother. Hope you are well. I am. Hope you are as well too, Frankie D. God bless you, brother. Thank you very much for the support. And we had an anonymous donor over on Dono Chat send in $10. So thank you very much, the anonymous donor. God bless you. Really appreciate the support, everybody. Smash that like, and let's continue on here.
You know, I think we need to understand how we got where we are today. I don't see anybody talking about that. And I think Americans are beginning to turn these people off. You know, Democrats, Republicans, it's the uniparty. Who are we kidding? What are they doing for us? The swamp gets bigger and richer. The rest of the country gets poorer. I don't see any good outcome right now from any of these candidates. Perhaps I'm too harsh, but that's the way I feel.
Last question, and it's more a piece of tape that I want to get you to respond to, but I think it's come to a lot of people's attention. This is just so perfect that one of the spokesmen for the Ukrainian military is an American guy, leftist, dressed up like a woman, who's now wearing a Ukrainian army uniform and talking about killing Putin. Watch this.
If you look at Putin's mouth, you'll notice that blood drips from it. He's a vampire, carrying out genocide against both Ukrainians and Russians alike. Vlad Putin bathes in the blood of innocent children and enjoys it. And this is why the dictator of the Russian Federation must be deposed, and why peace talks have to be focused on President Zelensky's 10-point peace formula and the full liberation of Ukraine.
How embarrassing is that? How absolutely embarrassing that, and the American representative over in Ukraine fighting for Ukraine is a mentally deranged person that has gender dysphoria, and it's just shilling out propaganda. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs, friends.
There's something so perfect about that, the convergence of every ugly anti-human trend in modern.
Is that a transgender person?
That's a guy with fake breasts.
Yeah,
yes.
That's interesting. Well, I think everything else is fake too. We estimate that at least 60,000 children from Ukraine have disappeared, vanished since this war began. Where are they? What about all of the women that have been sold into prostitution that once lived in Ukraine. This war is a catastrophe. The people bathing in blood are in Kiev and Washington, not in Moscow. And this sort of thing is going to play well until it can't. And that's the sad part. We're going to see this whole thing collapse and implode. It's coming.
And with it, NATO?
I would think so, because the Europeans right now, Germany is well into a recession. It has systematically deindustrialized itself by casting its lot with the anti-Russian crowd. And remember that in Europe, it was not very difficult to supply stereotypes left over from the Second World War of the Soviet armed forces. The Soviet army was, an exercise in barbarism and savagery, mass rape, you name it.
Totally.
That's not Russia today. Russia today is a very different society, very different state. And that's been Putin's effort from day one. He's been interested in restoring Russia as an Orthodox Christian state with a true national identity and a strong national culture. That's probably another reason why so many people want to destroy Russia, because it's the last European state that has not been flooded with foreigners and turned into some sort of polyglot experiment, which is failing badly, by the way, because at some point, all of these unwanted people in Europe, and for that matter, here as well, I suspect, when things fall apart economically, it's going to get very hard on them. Because people are going to look around and they go through this, well, wait a minute, I'm an American. Who are you? What are you doing here? Why are you living that way? Why are you being subsidized? I'm a German. You don't belong here. You need to go home.
I'm getting $1,400 a month in retirement that I paid into my entire life, and you just show up from Congo and you're getting $2,200.
Well, here's another one. The president announced yesterday on one of these tweets, somebody tweets for him, obviously, that the people that have lost everything in Hawaii, thousands of them lost everything, are going to receive a one-time payment of $700. Now, I haven't been to Hawaii in a long time. I'm not even sure I've ever been there, but I know that $700 isn't going to take care of a family for very long.
No.
But in the meantime, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars continue to flow into this black hole called Ukraine, which I think is an exercise in fraud, deceit, and criminality, to be blunt. So when's it going to stop? When are we going to take care of Hawaii? Let's go back to Ohio, where we had the derailment and the chemical spill. 4,000 human beings living in this area. The water is still not fit to drink, as I understand it. We wouldn't even invest the money to move those people to a safer area, even if it meant temporary housing or permanent housing, until this thing was cleaned up. What have we done? This is the problem. It is America last on every level. The last people who are consulted, the last people who are benefiting from anything that goes on in Washington are Americans. This cannot go on. It's got to end. And I think it will end. But unfortunately, it's like everything else. We're going to have to be pushed over the cliff into the abyss. I think that's where we're headed.
Well, on that cheerful note, Retired Colonel Douglas Macgregor, thank you.
All right, we're going to get into the next one now. That is going to be focusing on the Israel-Palestine conflict with Colonel Douglas Macgregor. So stay tuned. That's going to be great, guys. Smash that like. I just want to address a few super chats that came in. Shout out to Jilly Bear, throws in $15, says, fairly new here. Having trouble finding close Orthodox Christian churches in my area. Does your website or some site provide links to state-by-state churches? Thank you. Jilly Bear, I do not provide a map for Orthodox Christians. You could post, again, a general area where you are in the live chat, and I'm sure there's tons. We have over 1,000 people watching right now. We have many Orthodox Christians that would probably help you or point you in the right direction. Depending on where you're at in the country, there's plenty of Orthodox churches. If not, I would recommend just using Google Maps or something like that to look up Orthodox churches to see what's close. But thank you so much for the $15 super chat, and welcome. We're glad to have you here, and God bless you in your journey. Next one, we get another one from Ghostios, throws in $2, says gender dysphoria is in the DSM-5 too. Exactly, and that's what's so sad. We have a transgender representative of us over in Ukraine, mentally deranged, but really that's what the West is. It's on a suicide mission. We look at the food, we look at the military operations, we look at again, the America Last platform that we're unfortunately a part of, is the biggest threat to your life as an American is the American government. One, to create a world that hates us and wants to nuke our own country and poison our own lands. But also the people who are trying to kill me and are the worst for my family are certainly the people running this government. So sad situation. But thank you so much, Ghostios, for that. And let's get into the next one. We have another anonymous donor over on Dono Chat, throws in $10. Thank you very much, anonymous donor, for the $10 super chat. God bless you. All right, now let's get into, again, Israel-Palestine. This is the hot war, right? This is really what's going to be the catalyst for Armageddon. And again, as a Christian, we can see it moving two ways. For the Muslims, they believe that they have a destiny for Allah has favored them for a global domination. We see the rising of the Ummah. The Ummah is a theological term for the entire global Muslim community. And you see the protests, be it in London, be it in Paris, be it in Germany, be it in Turkey. I don't know if you guys saw the amount of protest in favor of Palestine in Turkey. Massive. This is a Muslim awakening. And this is really creating a living and breathing Ummah that is ready for war. And again, the NGOs, who I won't say who are behind it, but the NGOs both bringing in people through the southern border in this country, but also have flooded Europe with migrants, have brought in people who are of military age and certainly did not see the world the same way. So let's now check out Tucker Carlson and Colonel Macgregor lay out the Israel-Palestine conflict, of which we have one side, the Israeli side, the Jews wanting to bring about the coming of their Messiah, which is the Jewish Antichrist. And we see then Islam seeing this response in the depravity of the state of Palestine in the way that Israel is, again, killing innocent people in response to Hamas, which many suspect they allowed this terrorist event to happen so that they could create this problem, reaction, solution. The same old rigmaroles we've seen over and over again. Shout out to Mike 007, throws in $20. No comment. Thank you so much, Mike 007. God bless you, brother. Really appreciate the support. Guys, smash that like. And if you want to show some love, feel free to send in a super chat. Let's get started on this second video. This is, again, Tucker Carlson and Colonel Douglas Macgregor on the Israeli-Palestine conflict.
We seem to be heading to war with Iran. Certainly the Biden administration is pushing us in that direction. What's new and interesting and ominous is that very few Republicans, the opposition party, are pushing back. Instead, some of the party's leaders are encouraging it. Here, for example, is Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina from last weekend on NBC.
You said this week that the only way to keep the war from escalating is to hold Iran accountable, part of what you're talking about now, and that it might mean bombing their oil refineries. Yeah. Have you had any discussions with the Biden administration about this?
A bit. Here's my message. If Hezbollah, which is a proxy of Iran, launches a massive attack on Israel, I'll consider that a threat to the state of Israel, existential in nature. I will introduce a resolution in the United States Senate to allow military action by the United States in conjunction with Israel to knock Iran out of the oil business. Iran, if you escalate this war, we're coming for you.
Are you effectively poised to declare war on Iran? That's very strong language.
I am poised to use military force to destroy the source of funding for Hamas and Hezbollah.
No, that's Lindsey.
So there's Lindsey Graham, another warmonger in the Senate, wanting, again, for American children to die, American young men to die in favor of his, I don't know if they play the clip in this video, but he literally calls it a holy war. Again, this totally subverted Schofield dispensational worldview where these American Christians, specifically evangelicals and Protestants, think that the biblical Israel is the same thing as the state of Israel that came into existence in 1948, which it is not. And so, unfortunately, it's the same old game plan, is war, war, war.
Lindsey Graham, a few others in the Republican Party will be that open about their intentions, but very few disagree with him. Certainly not in private. They agree.
So what would war with Iran mean? Well, it's hard to know because virtually no one who's talking about it in public is operating from a deep interest in America's interest. Is this good for us or is it not? Former Colonel Douglas Macgregor is the CEO of Our Country, Our Choice, and one of the first people we turn to for analysis of events like this because he is interested in what happens to the United States. He joins us now. Doug, thank you for coming on. Do you think that we are moving toward war with Iran?
Yes, I do. And it looks like the chosen destination is indeed Armageddon. There doesn't seem to be any real appreciation for the implications for us and frankly, for Europe and the world, as well as the Middle East, of such action. Take for an example, just on the economic side, about 20% of the world's oil passes through the Straits of Hormuz every month. Probably 25% of liquefied natural gas. And you're talking about shutting down 2 to 3 million barrels a day of oil from Iran. This entire region is involved in the war. This is not an Iranian monopoly by any stretch of the imagination. But the point is that when we're looking at 10-year treasury yields up over 5%, and people are increasingly convinced that the Fed has lost control, the economic side of the house is catastrophe. Then when you look at the military side, you have to look at the arsenal of missiles that Iran possesses. And they can reach out 1,200 miles with great precision, very high explosive conventional warheads that would do enormous damage, destroying whole city blocks in places like Haifa, Tel Aviv, even Jerusalem, though I doubt they would attack Jerusalem. The bottom line is that we need to think this through, and everyone right now is emoting. There is no thinking anywhere, as far as I can tell. The only possible exception may be, amazingly enough, Mr. Erdogan in Turkey, who came out this morning and indicated he was willing to mediate the dispute between Israel and Hamas. Whether or not anyone in Washington or Israel is interested in talking, I don't know. But if we could sideline Turkey and keep Turkey out of the fight, that would ultimately help Israel enormously.
But sadly, since this interview happened, this is October 23rd, and today is October 29th. Israel has continued to carpet bomb Gaza, and in so doing has drawn the ire of Erdogan. And so he is much more likely, and he's already given explicit support of the Palestinian people, given the increased violence of Israel towards innocent people. It's not just Hamas. They just indiscriminately bomb, like I said. The third oldest church in Christendom this past week was bombed by Israel, which killed multiple families inside. So what, as Colonel Macgregor was highlighting, initially Erdogan was keeping a cool head. Israel continues to push the buttons that it seems to be has even pushed him over the edge to some degree. Want to give a special shout out to a few super chatters. Shout out to Marie Smithville, throws in $5. God bless you, brother. Thank you for the support. And shout out to Lawrence John, throws in 100 Norwegian, says the world is too full of passions. No doubt about that. War will sadly come. When you hear about the temple being built, the end is near. And that's what I suspect. Again, as a Christian, we know that the Jews believe that their Messiah is yet to come, which from a Christian perspective is the Antichrist. I've been telling people, as soon as I see the Dome of the Rock being blown up, an excuse for Israel to go ahead and build the third temple, that's when I will say we are in the end times. Until then, certainly we're moving closer to it. But once I see the cornerstone, once I see the attack on the Dome of the Rock, once these things come to pass, I think it's going to be clear that the book of Revelation is now in full effect. He says, again, while there is still time, God bless you, from Romanian Ortho. Well, thank you so much, Lawrence John. God bless you, brother. And thank you very, very much for the support. I truly appreciate that. And we had one anonymous super chat come in over on the dono chat of $5. Thank you so much, the anonymous donor. God bless you. I truly appreciate it. All right. Now with that, let's get back to the combo here.
So what would happen to the United States if we followed Senator Graham's advice and just began bombing critical infrastructure. If
By the way, don't you guys think it's interesting about Lindsey Graham? He is a grown man, unmarried, no children, and really gives off that he is batting for the other side, if you know what I'm saying, which have been rumors for years, but I speculate it's true.
in Iran, what would happen then?
Well, all of the bases that we have in Iraq and Syria, unfortunately, where we still have over 1,000 Americans, all of those would be targeted. And this time they would target them accurately, and this destruction would be wholesale. I would expect trouble here at home and in the United States because of the open border. Hezbollah has a very large operation in Mexico. There are no doubt many, many, many Hezbollah agents inside the United States. We can only begin to imagine the kind of trouble they could cause. The missile and space program in Iran is very, very advanced, as is their cyber warfare capability. All of these things would be brought to bear against us. But what's most important, I think, for Americans to understand is if we attack Iran on the basis of Hezbollah's alleged willingness to attack Israel if Israel invades Gaza, we will end up in a fight with Russia. Russia will not sit by quietly and watch Iran destroyed by the United States air and naval power in the region. And once Russia enters this, it becomes much more than just a local conflict, maybe more than just a regional war. We haven't thought this through. We need to do that. And I doubt seriously at that point that the Turks would be able to stay out. The Turks are Sunni Muslims. They are the de facto leaders of the Sunni Muslim world. They have the largest armed forces in the region. They are in close proximity to Israel. They could move forces south through Syria very rapidly. And I'm sure Bashar al-Assad, assuming he even survives the opening of this campaign, would not obstruct them.
So many questions, but just to back up one click, you described Iran's missile arsenal, but Iran is a country that's been the subject of very intense sanction regime from the United States, increased by the last president, Donald Trump. But for a long time, how is Iran still such a powerful country militarily given those sanctions? It sounds like maybe they didn't work.
Oh, no, I think that's an important point, Tucker, and you're absolutely right. We place so much value on these sanctions and assume that they have this profound impact. Normally, sanctions harm the population in terms of lowering its standard of living, making life more difficult for the everyday citizen, but it doesn't fundamentally alter the policy or the goals and objectives of the government. And this is something that I don't think we understand. The same thing is true for Hamas and Gaza. You know, you want to go after Hamas. You want to destroy it. I think everyone with a sound mind is interested in the destruction of Hamas. But do you want to kill hundreds of thousands of people in order to get at Hamas? That's the question. We have the same problem in Iran. Our sanctions have not harmed the regime's ability to develop and build very, very complex and sophisticated missiles. These missiles are very accurate now. There are hundreds, if not thousands. And the long-range missiles, the 1,200-mile range theater ballistic missiles, are a very serious threat to us in the region and to Israel. And the sanctions have had no impact there. If anything, the Iranians have pulled together the best human capital in their country, the best engineers, the best thinkers, and put them to work primarily on missile technology and on cyber warfare. And that's where we stand right now. We have to expect the worst as a result if we strike Iran.
How is the U.S. military, do you think, having spent your life in it, leading troops in combat and at the Pentagon, positioned to respond to war with Iran right now? Are we in a strong position or not, in your view?
No, I don't think we're in a strong position. I think we're probably at the weakest point in our recent history. I think you've got to look at the realities of new weapon systems, new capabilities. The United States Navy, if it's going to preserve its capability at sea, is probably going to be compelled to operate somewheres north and west of Sicily. If it comes within closer range, then it falls into this envelope where the Iranians can strike it. And as I said before, we have to assume the Russians will come into this. Once you move into the Eastern Mediterranean, you are vulnerable to the Kinshal missiles and other missiles, cruise missiles and hypersonic missiles that the Russians have. This makes it very difficult to fly strikes in support of the Israeli Defense Force against Hezbollah, because now you're flying a very long distance. You deliver your ordnance, you have to land in Israel in order to refuel. Israel is going to operate under a hail, if not a rainstorm, of missiles and rockets, making it very, very dangerous to do so. So our naval power, while substantial, may not have the desired impact on the ground that we would like. And then finally, we have no real army anymore. The army is down to perhaps, 450,000. How much of that is ready to fight is open to debate. Much of it is sitting in Eastern Europe right now. We don't have the means to rapidly ship a large force of 80 to 100,000 troops on the ground into the region, which means that we're reliant on special forces and right now 2,000 Marines and perhaps 2,000 special forces and special operations forces. That's not going to make much of a dent. And as we've seen quite recently within the last 24 hours or so, some of our special ops forces and Israeli special ops forces went into Gaza to reconnoiter, to plan for where they might want to go to free hostages and make an impact. And they were shot to pieces and took heavy losses, as I understand it. I think that's where we're headed. And I don't see that as a win for Israel in any way, shape, or form. And I certainly think it's very dangerous for us. You know, as I've tried to point out to a number of people, until Britain entered World War I, it was just another European war. Once Britain entered it, it became a global war. Well, once we are a co-belligerent, we enter this thing, it's going to be very difficult for Russia and Turkey not to also come into this fight against us, because they will not tolerate the sort of collective punishment that Israel plans for Gaza.
The U.S. military does have an awful lot of generals, however, as you pointed out, multiples of the number we had, the absolute number we had during World War II.
Which is what we just watched in the last video, where you talked about 7 generals during World War II, 44 generals, 4-star generals now. This sort of growth in the American military industrial complex, the bureaucracy of it, and these generals sort of controlling various regional areas around the world for this global empire. Pretty sad. I also wanted to highlight a few super chats that just came in and thank everybody. We had Marconius throws in $5. Thank you so much for the $5 super chat. He says, thanks for covering these videos. Of course, I think this is very important. And I know some people hadn't seen these, so stringing these all together succinctly so people can check them all out, I thought would be important. So thank you for that super chat. And Blue Skittle throws in $9.99. Thank you so much. No comment there. Truly appreciate it. And that wife of his throws in $2, says, look up Graham's ladybugs. Don't. Trigger warning. Yeah, I know what you're referring to, and I am not going to look that up. But if other people want to look up Lindsey Graham's ladybugs, feel free to do that. So thank you so much for the $2 super chat. I do appreciate it. One of the things I wanted to mention, too, was he was talking about the sanctions, how the U.S. now wants to put sanctions on Iran, and how those have totally backfired for Russia. I don't know if you guys have realized. Remember when McDonald's and all these major Fortune 500 companies were pulling out of Russia during the beginning of the Ukraine-Russian conflict? Well, that only actually ended up strengthening the ruble, because it forced the Russian economy to sort of no longer be operating with some of the Western powers. And what has seen, instead of the ruble tanking, and the exact opposite happened, it's now stronger than ever. And so it's funny how, again, even the American military industrial complex, the empire itself, when it tries to hammer down one of these other nations through sanctions, it ends up totally backfiring. So,
and they're paid to think about this stuff. Why has it dawned on no one, apparently, who's spoken publicly anyway, that this could really harm our country gravely? Why is no one saying that?
Well, I'm sure there are people in the U.S. military who are aware, but let's be frank. Most of the people at the top of the military have never operated under artillery fire or rocket fire. They haven't seen direct fire combat. They haven't seen real war per se. Remember, we've had the luxury of sitting around forward operating bases and striking opponents that were armed with AK-47s and command detonated mines, an occasional mortar or rocket. Very, very low intensity combat. This is a high-end conventional war that we're looking at with the potential to go nuclear, which obviously I don't think we or the Russians want to happen, but we have the wild card in Israel. They do have a nuclear capability. We don't know what the tripwire is for them to employ such a weapon. At that point, of course, all bets are off, and I think most of the world would turn against Israel. Right now, they just have to worry about the Muslim world against them. It would certainly widen if they went that far. There are too many unknowns.
But in regards to that, I don't know if you guys have seen, I mentioned this earlier in the stream. Have you guys seen, it's again, this is just me looking at social media, the general trends. Now, certainly there's a strong contingent of Zionism here in the United States, but Zionism, generally speaking, when we're talking about millennials and Gen Z, it seems to be on a dramatic decline. I mean, just compare the rhetoric of Zionism in the state of Israel 10 years ago versus today. And he's talking about Israel losing its allies. I mean, in regards to the general belief of people around the world, I'm seeing a dramatic decline in the favor that people give, or even grace they give, extend towards Israel, especially given the war crimes they keep doing towards the Palestinians.
And uncertainties here. And, you know, everyone always assumes at the beginning of such a conflict, well, it'll be contained. We'll only have to fight these people, Hamas, maybe Hezbollah. It never works out that way. These things always last longer than everyone thinks. The resources required are much more profound than what we anticipated. And remember, we've already used up many of our war stocks in Ukraine, and we've left Ukraine in a state of ruins, places on life support, 500,000 dead. What are we going to do to Israel if we press ahead down this road? And it seems, listening to Secretary of State Blinken this morning, who more and more sounds like our commander-in-chief, that there is no room for negotiation, no room for mediation. Hamas must be destroyed. We must go into Gaza. If so, I think we're on this very dangerous road to Armageddon.
What is the objective of the IDF and of Blinken, of the United States and Israel in this short term? Destroy Hamas, but what does that mean?
Well, to destroy Hamas, in the minds, I think, of policymakers in Washington as well as in Israel, is to systematically root them out and kill them in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's be frank. When you go into an urban environment, you can't pick or choose your targets.
You guys hear me? Are we still good here? Come on. You guys hear me? Looks like something happened here to the video. Okay. We're at 1339. Let me refresh real quick. Maybe it has something to do with that. You need money for the internet. That's right. If you want to send me some money for the internet, please. Okay, looks like there's something going on here with X or Twitter. Anyways, let's see here. Want to give a special shout out. Again, somebody sent in another anonymous super chat over on Dono Chat, sent in $5. Thank you so much for the anonymous donator. Yeah, what is going on? What is happening here to the internet? Very strange. I'm still live, but I'm not able to get an internet connection for some reason. Why does the video? I'm clearly on the internet. All you guys can hear me, but yet they just yanked my ability to be on Twitter. What's going on here? This is so strange. So strange. Huh. Okay. I think it just went back up. Are we good now? Let me see here. Retry. There we go. There we go. Okay, we're back. We're back. Very strange. Yeah, is the NSA after me? What's going on here? Very strange how all that sudden just I'm clearly on the internet. I wouldn't be able to continue to stream. Yet it just stopped. How strange. All right. Maybe Mossad's a little upset with some of these streams. I'm not sure. Anyway, let's continue on here.
Well, let's be frank. When you go into an urban environment, you can't pick or choose your targets very easily. First of all, no matter how well trained you are, you're moving into an area that is rubbled. There are ruins. It's very difficult to negotiate in that. When I say negotiate, I mean negotiate the terrain through the rubble. You don't know where the enemy is going to pop up. Once you destroy all these buildings, he can be anywhere. So you're going to take losses going in. But more important, once you start going in there, you're going to end up killing whatever you find. Because the soldier, the Israeli soldier, the American soldier, very much the same, they want to live. They want to survive. When in doubt, pull the trigger. They're not going to stop and say, now, wait a minute, before I shoot, I really need to think about this because that may be a civilian or there may be a family there. That's not going to happen. You can't expect that. So the notion that this is a kind of warfare that is so precise that it can avoid so-called collateral damage is just nonsense. We can't expect miracles from the IDF or our own troops, which means that you're going to annihilate everything in Gaza. And remember, the Israelis would like to push the population out. The problem is when you push the population out, if you did into Egypt, you're going to run into trouble with the Egyptians. But even if you manage to get them there, you're only moving the problem that confronts you 20 miles, 30 miles away. In other words, killing people isn't going to solve the problem. But it's very attractive at the moment, and it's very difficult to talk people out of it.
Do you believe American troops will be engaged, physically present in the invasion of Gaza?
I'm sure they will, because we have American citizens who are hostages. And we've already made it clear that we will assist and support the Israelis in freeing those hostages. Again, the problem is, how do you get the hostages out when you're fighting in this extraordinarily dirty and complex environment? What's to prevent the hostages from simply being executed as soon as you move in force into Gaza? I think the Israelis know that. I think our leadership in Washington knows it. They may have even decided that if that happens, that's tragic, but the ultimate goal of destroying Hamas demands this. Again, it's the issue of collective punishment. I would encourage Americans everywhere to listen to King Abdullah of Jordan's speech in Cairo just a couple of days ago, where he made it clear that he agreed with the abhorrence of what had happened in Israel and loathes Hamas for its barbarity and savagery. But he also goes on to point out that collective punishment meted out to 2 million people is unacceptable, both under international law and for humanitarian reasons. That's the problem. And as Americans see more destruction and more film footage and photographs come out of Gaza showing children, women, old men dying, being killed, the support for Israel is going to erode. And at the same time, the anger and hatred inside the region, which already dislikes Israel, is going to be phenomenal. So Israel is doing something that I think no one has ever accomplished, at least not in my lifetime, and that is uniting Sunni and Shia against itself. That's why I think we have an obligation to save Israel from itself. But that's not a popular position. Right now, it's bombs away and everyone is cheering.
What about the argument often articulated, including by leading presidential candidates recently, that considerations like the ones you just raised, like the long-term effects of decisions or global public opinion, downstream terror attacks, thinking about any of that is a violation of principle, and you're basically giving in to the terrorists by weighing any of it? How would you respond to that?
Most politicians follow public opinion. Right now, public opinion supports violence against Hamas, and if that includes the destruction of Gaza, so be it, we support it. Very few people look beyond that and understand the larger consequences. In the last century, or I guess I should say in the early 20th century, the great powers intervened on more than one occasion to prevent Turkey from being destroyed, not because they loved the Ottoman Turks, but because they saw the alternative being chaos. Turkey had a role to play. Therefore, we want to preserve it. We have to think about Egypt. Egypt has been a good strategic partner for Israel. They've kept the peace there for decades. The Egyptians are now in a very difficult position. At least 100,000 Egyptian troops have been moved towards the border with Gaza, involving several divisions. Under great pressure from public opinion in the Arab world, in the Muslim world, they may have to engage the Israelis because no one will protect the population in Gaza. That's a terrible, terrible possibility, one that we don't want, because if that happens to Egypt and Hezbollah attacks from the north, that will bring in everyone else. And we're suddenly confronting a war on a regional level that is going to harm us economically, physically in many ways, but could threaten the very existence of Israel, which I think is the root problem here. We don't want Israel's existence threatened. We want to save Israel. We want to keep it intact, but we may not be able to do that if this war runs out of control. And let's be frank, historically, wars run out of control. They move in directions you never anticipated. So if you think you can plot this route forward as Lindsey Graham thinks, you're crazy. Once this is unleashed, it's not manageable anymore.
You made reference a couple of times to the American citizens being held by Hamas. What do we know about them?
Well, I think most of them are American citizens who happen to be Jewish, who are there to celebrate during the holiday period or participate in this music festival we've heard so much about. I don't think they ever anticipated anything like this happening.
Yeah.
The problem is, as we've said before, extracting them from this haystack is nigh on to impossible.
What about the concerns about terrorism in the United States in the wake of all of this?
Well, I think they're very valid. Yeah, I think these concerns are very, very valid. We've had open borders now for the last 2.5 years, but we've had an illegal migration problem for the last 3+ decades. We don't know who's in the country. We really don't. No one at Homeland Security can tell you who is here. The Europeans face something quite similar. They were bullied into admitting millions of Muslims from the Middle East and Africa. We've been bullied by our government to open the borders and let in effectively anybody who wants to come. So we don't know who's here, but we do know that Hamas, as well as Hezbollah, have positions in Mexico. Of the two, Hezbollah is much stronger, much larger, and much better equipped and financed. So we have to expect that once Hezbollah is in the war and we are against them and Iran, that much of our infrastructure will be at risk. Something as bad or potentially even worse than 9/11 could happen here. This brings us back to the whole issue of immigration and border security. We've essentially ignored it. The same politicians who are pushing for war against virtually everyone in the Middle East, which is what it boils down to in the final analysis, don't seem to have thought carefully about protecting us or our borders from all of the terrible things that we've seen in Israel. Mm-hmm. How much damage could these same people do to us in a shopping mall in the space of 15 minutes? It doesn't take much imagination to understand how dangerous this is.
Do you think that this war, if it comes, and as you said, it seems like it is, how will that affect American domestic politics? War traditionally has been used by the people in power to shut down dissent. Can you imagine that happening in this case?
Well, I think they'll try. Fortunately, thanks to people like Elon Musk, who bought Twitter and ended the censorship or suspended it, the truth does get through and reach Americans. But Americans will figure out pretty quickly if...
Uh-oh. Internet's lagging out again. I don't know what's going on here. Come on. You got to be kidding me. We got a couple super chats that just came in.
Tend to happen at once.
Let me address these real quick. Orthodox Centurion throws in $10. Shout out to Orthodox Centurion. He says, I learned about the ladybug thing. Again, we warn you, do not look up Lindsey Graham and ladybug unless you really want to find out. We're truly in the pagan Roman Republic / Weimar part of America's history. May God have mercy on us all. I totally agree, Orthodox Centurion. America is falling. America is in the decadent Roman state. It only took us less than 300 years for us. We didn't even get the full experience of a global empire like some of the other ones. It's pretty sad how degenerate we are as a country. It's disgusting. And like I said, there's very little as an American to feel proud of right now. Shout out to Highlander, throws in $4.99. Thank you very much, Highlander, for your super chat. Truly do appreciate it. God bless you. And we over on Dono Chat, we had our anonymous super chatter send in $15 more anonymous. I literally don't know who it is, and it says last donation. Well, thank you very much for the last donation from our anonymous super chatter, throws in $15. And shout out to Gary, throws in a very generous $100 super chat right here. Let me close this. $100. He says, I know this isn't much. This doesn't touch an internet bill necessarily, but it's something. Well, thank you so much, Gary, for the $100 super chat. I truly do appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much for that. Again, there's Orthodox Centurion super chat. Let's get back to this conversation and wrap up Colonel Macgregor and Tucker Carlson on the Israel-Palestine fiasco. And then we're going to be diving into the latest Tucker Carlson interview where he talks about Zelensky essentially outlawing the canonical Orthodox Church and sentencing priests, monks, abbots to prison. That's going to be next. So stay with us. Let's finish this one.
You have the war overseas and the war here, but remember the economy and the financial condition right now. If you turn on any of the business channels for the first time in my memory, lots and lots of analysts are coming.
What the heck is going on with the internet right now? Why is it so laggy? I am not sure what's going on. Guys, smash that like while you're here. There we go.
Having lost control.
Come on. What the heck is going on with the internet? This is absolutely ridiculous. I've never seen this happen. What the heck? Okay. All right, guys, I apologize. I'm not sure what exactly is going on with the internet, why this keeps freezing. Never had this happen before. Yeah, somebody says, you are being watched. It sure feels like it. They're watching you. It sure feels like it. Very strange for these. This never happens before. I have internet that's 200 up, 200 down. Doesn't make any sense why all of a sudden it's freezing now. Yeah. Shout out to Dr. Meme, throws in $1.99, says internet money. God bless you. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Meme. I appreciate that. I can use all that I can get. That's what's so weird is like I'm still streaming. Everything's fine. But for some reason, X or Twitter is having problems. I don't get it. What exactly is going on here? There we go. Okay. It looks like we're back.
The root problem here. We don't want Israel's existence to even worsen in the space of 15 minutes. It doesn't take much imagination to understand how dangerous this is.
Do you think that this war, if it comes, and it, as you said, it seems like it is, how will that affect American domestic politics? War traditionally has been used by the people in power to shut down dissent. Can you imagine that happening in this case?
Well,
welcome, Calamark.
Fortunately, thanks to people like Elon Musk, who bought Twitter and ended the censorship or suspended it, the truth does get through and reach Americans. But Americans will figure out pretty quickly if two things tend to happen at once. You have the war overseas and the war here, but remember the economy and the financial condition right now. If you turn on any of the business channels for the first time in
What the heck is going on with Twitter? Why is it doing this? This is so strange. We got a couple super chats that came in. Dr. Meme says, internet money, God bless you. Thank you very much, Dr. Meme. Welcome, Colamark, for to the COTEL crew for a YouTube membership. God bless you. Enjoy all the emojis. Thanks for joining the crew. And Mr. Smirks throws in $1.99 and says, you're in their radar, DPH. It's starting to feel like it. This is a little strange why this keeps going out. What is going on? I mean, clearly the internet's working. I'm streaming. I can see all the live chats. Everything's popping up. But Twitter keeps going out when I'm trying to show a video. Very, very strange. I may have to move it over to my phone and use the network if that's the only way we're going to be able to do it. This is so weird. So hold on with me here. Let me go to Tucker Carlson on my phone. At least we'll have some audio. I'll get off the Wi-Fi. Not that the Wi-Fi is a problem, but okay. And then we are at 2257. What the heck is going on?
Much damage for these same people.
All right. Sorry about this, guys. I'm not sure why this is happening. This is so weird. Never happens before. But of course, today it decides to start crapping out. Okay. Well, we're going to play it on my phone. So here's some audio for right now, guys. Until the internet comes back up, I'll pull it back up here. But here is my phone playing it because it looks like that's all we got.
Due to us.
Let me even attach it to the speaker here. What is going on? Okay. Bluetooth will connect here. We're going to bypass whoever's trying to stop us. We will not let them win. So let's go back to the interview here.
Shopping mall in the space of 15 minutes. It doesn't take much imagination to understand how dangerous this is.
Of course, now it comes back. So here we go. Let me go back. We're at 2257. Colonel Macgregor, 2257. Let's tie back into Pat's Boom 2.
Here, but remember the economy and the financial condition, right? If you turn on any of the business channels for the first time in my memory, lots and lots of analysts are coming on and talking about the Fed having lost control, the rising interest rates, the inability to manage and cope with the sovereign national debt of 33 trillion. And that's the tip of a proverbial iceberg. We already have Americans who are struggling with inflation anyway. Now we're looking at potentially scarcity. We've drained our strategic oil reserve for all intents and purposes. If the Strait of Hormuz is shut down, if the Suez Canal is closed, we're in a lot of trouble in the short run, that's for sure. How rapidly can we recover from all of this? How many refineries can we put back into operation? How much drilling can we do quickly? The answer is not very much. So draining that strategic oil reserve was a very serious mistake.
But as we become impoverished and chaotic and subject to these terror attacks, we'll be winning important moral victories, don't you think?
Well, in our effort to stand at Israel's side and help protect Israel, we have taken a different route and cast moral turpitude to the side. In other words, how do you help one without committing a war crime against the other? This is the problem with collective punishment. This is the problem with annihilating Gaza and trying to sweep out its population. That's unacceptable to us as Americans. I don't think if you sat down any of Israel's most ardent supporters in the United States and said, are you willing to trade the lives of several 100,000 people in Gaza for the lives taken in Israel by Hamas? After all, Hamas and Palestinian Jihad were the fighters. They lost 1,500. There were 3,000.
Oh, not again. You got to be kidding me. What the heck? What the heck is going on? Gosh dang. We got another super chat that came in. Shout out to Muffhead, throws in $5. Muffhead says it's important to form tight groups and real friendships with your Orthodox brothers. Individuals will not endure the struggles. Don't forget to pray. Yeah, praying is essential right now, because if you don't have a strong relationship with God, there's not much to give you any sort of hope in the world right now. And that's just sadly the state of things. So forming that close relationship with the Almighty, praying, working on yourself, trying to do what's right, and building real strong friendship groups. I think this is huge. I totally agree with Muffhead here that building tight groups, close friendships, your Orthodox, this is why going to church, being part of a parish, being part of a community is so important and so influential for our lives, the people around us, support groups, all types of things. So thank you so much, Muffhead, for that. God bless you, brother. Really appreciate you. Okay, come on. Let's see if the internet's working. What is going on with Twitter and X? Why does this keep going out? This makes no sense at all. Gosh. All right, I'm going to try to refresh it again. If not, we're going to play it from my phone. We're playing this one way or another. I'm not letting whoever is doing this
We
win.
seem to be heading.
See, how does it just work all of a sudden? What the heck? Okay, now it stops working. Gotcha. So it works, but then when I try to get it to where we need to go, it stops working. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense here. What the heck? Come on. Come on. Let's go. What is going on? If somebody has some advice, let me know. How is only certain web pages not responding while the entire live stream, live chat, donations, everything's running fine except Twitter? How does that make any sense whatsoever? I don't get it. All right, let's just screw it. Let's just go straight to the phone. We'll do it this way. We're going to bypass. All right, we'll go to X and just continue on this way. Here we go.
Do you think that this war, if it comes, and as you said, it seems like it is, how will that affect?
And that's the tip of a proverbial iceberg. We already have Americans who are struggling with inflation anyway. Now we're looking at potentially scarcity. We've drained our strategic oil reserve for all intents and purposes. If the Strait of Hormuz is shut down, if the Suez Canal is closed, we're in a lot of trouble in the short run, that's for sure. How rapidly can we recover from all of this? How many refineries can we put back into operation? How much drilling can we do quickly? The answer is not very much. So draining that strategic oil reserve was a very serious mistake.
But we'll be, as we become impoverished and chaotic and subject to these terror attacks, we'll be winning important moral victories, don't you think?
Well, in our effort to stand at Israel's side and help protect Israel, we have taken a different route and cast moral turpitude to the side. In other words, how do you help one without committing a war crime against the other? This is the problem with collective punishment. This is the problem with annihilating Gaza and trying to sweep out its population. That's unacceptable to us as Americans. I don't think if you sat down any of Israel's most ardent supporters in the United States and said, are you willing to trade the lives of several 100,000 people in Gaza for the lives taken in Israel by Hamas? After all, Hamas and Palestinian Jihad were the fighters. They lost 1,500. There were 3,000 involved in the several waves of the attack. They're dead. Now we're looking at perhaps 5,000 civilians dead. How many more will we witness? Is that somehow or another justified morally? And I think a lot of Americans will struggle with that. That's why I say it would be best if we had a cooling off period. I'm glad that the Israelis are waiting for additional naval power to arrive on station in the Mediterranean, and also for additional equipment, theater ballistic missile defense, and so forth. But we need to use this time to think carefully about how far we want to go, because right now it's a one-way street to regional war. And I don't think anybody really wants that if they think about it carefully. Therefore, looking at someone like Erdogan, however slippery we may consider him to be, his willingness to mediate is a bright light in an otherwise very dark sky. And we should look to that because we don't want him to be. His willingness to mediate is a bright light in an otherwise very dark sky. And we should look to that because we don't want the regional war. It will destroy us economically. We're already in bad shape. We've already suffered because of the foolish intervention in Ukraine to try to destroy Russia. Now we have Russia more powerful militarily than it's been since the 80s, and it's poised to enter on the side of Iran. We should all give that some serious thought.
Last question. Do you know of any leaders in the United States, political leaders at the Pentagon, within the Biden administration, who are thinking clearly about this, which is to say, who are framing their thoughts on it around what's best for the United States long term? Is anybody thinking that way?
Yes, there are. The problem is none of them hold high positions in government, and none of their voices or their analyses or their viewpoints are going to reach anybody in power. I think you have to listen carefully to what Secretary of State Blinken said. He was absolutely unambiguous. We are going to destroy Hamas, whatever that takes. That means regional war, frankly. And anybody who thinks that people are going to say, oh, no, we're afraid of America, we're not going to risk that, they're wrong. They are not afraid to risk attacking Israel for fear of coming into confrontation with us. We are not the power we were in 1991, and they know that. And economically, our position is very fragile. Let's face it. So the bottom line is, yes, there are people out there, but they're not being heard, and they're not going to be heard in the current environment.
Doug Macgregor, thank you so much for that. Appreciate it.
And that's going to conclude that talk. It looks like everything's working again. So let's pull up this last and final conversation. It's 10 minutes and 15 seconds long. And so to conclude all this, again, we've talked about Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine, the U.S. military-industrial complex, the incompetency, the ineptness of our world leaders, the pursuit towards globalism, the prophetic yearnings of the Jews, and the global conquering mentality of the Muslims. And now we can hear a little bit about how the globalists now are deliberately persecuting the true Orthodox Church and banning it, essentially, within Ukraine. So here we go. This is the most recent conversation that Tucker Carlson's posted. This is episode 34, of which he says, of all of Biden's crimes, backing the Ukrainian government as it throws priests in jail may be the most revealing. So before we get into that, I want to read a few super chats. Shout out to Rough Hands for renewing his membership. He says Twitter has some serious issues with buffering for months, so I don't know if it's anything malicious. It seems weird. Maybe it is just Twitter, because it's so weird how everything is working but Twitter. But thank you for that. Melaforta throws in $2. She says, download all vids before you play on stream. Yeah, I absolutely will next time. This is so annoying, but I will. Thank you for that, and thanks for the $2 super chat, sister. And Blue Skittle throws in $1.99. He says, interview might be on another site. I'm not sure. It might be. Hopefully this for the next 10 minutes it'll work here. But thank you so much, Blue Skittle. And Alpha Numerica throws in $10 and says, Isaiah 19:17 through 25. Egypt will turn to the Lord and be blessed. Why do many people disregard the mission of giving Muslims the good news of salvation? Thoughts vis-a-vis pre-tribe rapture false doctrine? Could be. Certainly, as Orthodox Christian, we don't believe in the rapture, the same thing as the evangelicals and the Protestants do, but we do believe that many people will convert as we move closer to the last days, and this could be part and parcel of why the orthosphere and orthodoxy is growing and becoming so prominent online. I don't know. But without further ado, let's get to this last video, guys. Smash that like. And if you have any, want to show some love or send any questions in, feel free to do that as we go. All right. Whoop. we got to change the speaker. Gosh dang.
What's happening around the world seems like it's on Christianity. Thanks to the neocon project, virtually the entire ancient Christian population of Iraq was eliminated. The US government, under several presidents, has funded effectively the killing of Christians in Syria. And this continues throughout the Middle East and in Eastern Europe. In Ukraine, the most obvious example. The Ukrainian government has now banned an entire Christian denomination, and virtually no one in the United States has said anything about it. We thought it would be worth learning more. Bob Amsterdam is an attorney representing that denomination. He joins us now. Mr. Amsterdam, thank you very much for coming on. Explain, if you would, to people who haven't been following this, what's the denomination, what's its status now, and why?
The Ukrainian Orthodox Church is the home of Orthodoxy in Ukraine. It's been
And we would consider ourselves a denomination since we are the historical church founded by the apostles in Christ, but I digress.
around for 1,000 years. 5 years ago, the Ukrainian government, in its wisdom, set up what is called an autocephalous church, an independent church, independent of any connection to Russian canons, and decided that that church should replace the spiritual home of Ukrainians. That church, called the OCU, has been engaged in an absolutely vicious, unlimited campaign to steal property, harass, intimidate, and jail clerics, force conscription on believers, act in a manner that is almost unbelievable in a civilized society. And they'll use the excuse that this church, which, by the way, completely separated from Moscow in May of last year, is somehow connected to the Russian FSB. But based on the testimonies I've reviewed, there seems to be little substance to this allegation. And in fact, there are other institutions in Ukraine, like the secret police, who have been far more infiltrated by Russia than this particular church. Yet there is a reason for it, and it's a sad reason. The politicians in Ukraine, including perhaps the president, want to take the populist vote of those behind this new church, and therefore feel it is in their political interests to destroy this ancient branch of Christianity. And I absolutely can tell you that the damage that has been visited on the leadership of this church, including 5-year jail sentences for 75-year-old clerics, just astound you that in the 21st century, a country that wants to join the EU would ban a religion, let alone an ancient Christian form of that religion.
And moreover, a country whose functions...
It's indicative of the fact that the people that are behind the Ukraine-Russian war, but the Ukrainian side, are in fact Satanists. I mean, you look at what they promote, you look at the policies, you look at the abominations in regards to some of the gender-confused people. It is a sort of satanic inversion, and it makes sense why they would be so hateful toward the historic church there in Ukraine.
Government and national defense are effectively solely funded by the United States taxpayer. So I think Americans have an interest in this. And if you ask Christian leaders in this country, and I have, shouldn't we be concerned when the Ukrainian government, which we're all for apparently, is banning a Christian denomination? They just say, well, no, they're not really Christians, they're Russian agents. If you could respond to that in a little more detail.
I'd be happy to, because firstly, I carry no water for Putin. I'm banned from Russia. I defended one of Putin's biggest enemies. And it is very hard for this particular branch to obtain counsel because people are so afraid of being connected to Russia. We have mobilized so much hate and animosity towards Russia that it is completely obscene. And there is a huge PR ban on saying anything that is critical of the Ukrainian government or President Zelensky. And as a result of that, we fail to understand the context of internal Ukrainian affairs. And the Russian connection, the allegation of FSB connections, were it to be true, the evidence against these four metropolitans would be substantive, and yet they're painfully inadequate. The charges of one metropolitan who has 400 children he's adopted relates to hurting the feelings of other Christians or other denominations. I mean, these charges are on their face.
This is, again, an individual that some people believe could be a living saint. And we see that the Zelensky-backed globalist regime is significantly persecuting, even imprisoning these people.
Political charges.
So as an attorney who's operated in a bunch of different countries over many decades, and I would encourage people watching this to look up your resume. I think it speaks for itself. You're not an agent of the Russian government. It seems to me that it's like prima facie unacceptable for a so-called Western liberal government to ban a religious denomination. I thought that was a traditional red line. If you're doing that, by definition, you're authoritarian. Am I missing something?
Tucker, not at all. There is no basis under the Ukrainian Constitution or under international law or the laws of war or Ukraine's own resolution in terms of limited rights during the war for the banning of a religious denomination. And, on our Departures podcast that we actually have a lengthy interview where we explain all of this. This goes beyond anything acceptable. It's a violation of the EU Charter. It's a violation of the Copenhagen criteria that the Ukraine would have to satisfy to enter the EU. This has nothing but a Tammany Hall local political logic. And I have to tell you, frankly, I'm a Jewish person. I do not understand how it is that Christian leaders are not up in arms, because I think their silence on Ukraine is dangerous for Christian denominations throughout the world. And I'll tell you, part of the reason I'm doing that is because of my concern for Christian brothers and sisters and what it means for them, that we see raids on churches, we see violence, we see balaclava-covered individuals beating clergy, kidnappings. It is completely shocking. The UN has spoken out. German experts on orthodoxy have spoken out. Many Orthodox denominations don't recognize the, quote, new state church that the Ukraine have set up. And it is shocking to me that a country such as the United States with strong Christian leadership, I thought, could allow this to go on. Because what the Ukrainians try to tell you is that it's the same religion, this OCU state church is the same religion. But in fact, my clients, the church I represent, their prayers are in Church Slavonic. Their liturgy is different. And I can tell you, as somebody who is not a youngster, were somebody to come into my church or synagogue and change the language and change the leadership, I would be horrified. Yeah. There's nothing more intimate than one's relationship to his God. And this intervention for callous political purposes is unacceptable, and it is shameful that not only Christian, but all leaders of all denominations have not spoken out against the Ukrainian government.
Well, it does seem a little weird that it falls to a Jewish lawyer from the US to defend a Christian denomination, and bless you, sincerely bless you for that. But where is Russell Moore, the editor of Christianity Today? Where is the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, a purported Christian? I mean, they're backing this. What is that? Do you have any theory as to why this is happening?
Well, and I want to make a point here before even he answers. It's not just these fake Christians within government. Unfortunately, this is causing a real tension within Orthodoxy. I've tried to find the article of Patriarch Bartholomew is in fact in favor of the arrest of these gentlemen. And so Patriarch Bartholomew, who's the first among equals within the Orthodox Church, we don't have a papacy, so we don't have the same centralized structure, but he in fact said that these people deserve to be arrested. He is supporting this fake church that's being erected inside Ukraine. He's creating false jurisdictions around outside the historical context on how the church recognizes jurisdictions, all to create what it seems to be, again, I've talked about this before, leading to this false union in 2025 with Rome. That's certainly what it seems like they're moving towards. And the creation of these false churches, while then imprisoning monks, priests, abbots of the historic church there out of the Lavra there in Kiev. This is atrocious. And this is not just political. This is happening within the Orthodox Church itself. Patriarch Bartholomew has explicitly stated support for this. Let me see. Supports arrest of Ukrainian Orthodox. Let's see. Yeah, I don't have the exact article. I should have pulled it up. I wasn't thinking about it. But he makes an explicit, if you guys pull it up, you can search it yourself. He said he supported Zelensky. There's there's a photo of him shaking hands with Zelensky, talking about the banning of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, all because it's under the Moscow Patriarchate. This is happening within our church, guys, and within our lifetimes. Potentially in the summer of 2025, we may see the second schism within Orthodoxy, of a false orthodoxy that realigns with the papacy and the true faith, which is going to be exclusive, and saying that we are still the true historic church and we are not going to violate the way the church has normally operated. So pray for our patriarchs, pray for our leaders, pray for our church, because this political tension, this irrationality is not just limited to governments. It's now seeping down and infiltrating the entire hierarchy of our church. Although it's not new, it's been happening.
Yes, yes. The Ukraine lobby is immensely powerful. And there is a humongous ban on truth right now in the United States with respect to what's happening in Ukraine. Many of our leaders in the United States aren't even hearing this. It's the same in Europe. You cannot get through the massive PR machine that the Ukrainians have put together. And, you know, I'm on their side. I am absolutely pro-Ukraine in terms of the devastation they've suffered as a result of the war. But why that is being channeled against my clients, the Holy Synod, men who are dedicated to God, and their followers, who, let me be frank, are the most devout part of the Ukrainian populace. Why these innocents are being persecuted in this way is beyond my comprehension.
Probably because they are the most devout. I have to say, there's so few people of principle left in our public conversation, and you're demonstrably one of them. I'm grateful for what you're doing and for telling us about it. Mr. Amsterdam, thank you very much.
And guys, that's going to conclude at least our conversation. I want to give a special thank you to everybody who supported, but we are in dire situations here. Are we in Armageddon? Is World War III about to pop off? I don't know if we are in the end times, but we're certainly moving towards it. As I said, for me, the marker for me to come out publicly and say we're in the end times is the construction of the third temple or the blowing up of the Dome of the Rock. One of the two. Once I see the third temple being built, I will be sounding the alarm. God willing, if I'm not kicked off the internet or these platforms or social media, that we are there. We are moving towards the end times. And it seems like these wars, these proxy wars, are catalysts for it. Ukraine, Russia being one, for the globalists to fight a war against Russia through the unfortunate population of Ukraine, decimating their younger generation and their male population. Meanwhile, lying to the entire world about the success of this military operation. And now we see what appears to be a deliberate intention by Israel to allow Hamas to commit this atrocity that killed innocent people at that music festival, but using that as also a preemptive catalyst to then carpet bomb and wipe out the Palestinians, of which they have been doing day after day after day. Did you guys see that Israel's now going after Starlink because Elon Musk wanted to provide internet service to the Palestinians, and that now I guess the Israeli government has given an official condemnation towards Starlink and the idea that the Palestinians should have access to the internet. This is atrocious. That Israel can shut off the water, they can shut off the electricity to Palestine, and we're supposed to then be in favor of Israel as the ones that are being oppressed. At the same time, I'm not in favor of Islamic terrorism, and I suspect, as I said, the Ummah, the global Muslim population that is present, that it's unified. This conflict has unified the entirety of Muslims, both Shia and Sunni, and that's a scary thing. That's a scary thing that arguably the second to largest religion in the world, depending on how you break down Christianity, is now unified in one deliberate purpose, and that's to protect the Palestinians, or it could just be to their anger towards the Jewish state, but also then the Western world, generally speaking. And so we could be seeing terrorist activities right here in our homes. And so I said, as an Orthodox Christian beginning this video today, this stream, is we don't really choose a side in this conflict. Choosing the side of Israel, which has a theology which is antagonistic to ours, being that Jesus Christ is the incarnation of God, and though we reject him, to Islam, who having a sort of Nestorian, Aryan Christology of Christ, variation depending on who you ask, but Islam accepting aspects of Christianity, but then really their entire worldview is in program is something that we can't support. So where do we fall? Well, I think our only goal is to protect innocence. And so whether that be, of course, the innocent Christians, the innocent people, the innocent Muslims, the innocent Jews, is that we should just pray for innocent people. And so it's pretty sad situation we find ourselves in. But I want to thank everybody for being here. Smash that like. We got a few super chats that have not been addressed that came in over on the Dono chat. I want to give a special thank you again to everybody who donated. Kristen throws in $5. Shout out to Kristen. Says Jay and Jamie leave for their trip tomorrow. Everyone, please pray for them. That's right. Keep Jay and Jamie Dyer in your guys' prayers. They will be traveling. Next one. Thank you again, Kristen, for all the support. God bless you. Hope you and the family are well. Next one is a $10 super chat. Comes in from Anonymous. He says, what's your opinion about Putin? Also, what keeps American Orthodox from mass migrating to one state and becoming the most significant ethnic group over there like the Mormons did in Utah? First one, what's my opinion about Putin? Well, I'm not too polarized by Putin one way or another. I see Putin doing a lot of different things. Certainly, I would support any sort of politician in American sphere being as nationalistic and as Putin is with Russia. At the same time, I don't know his heart. Is he a true believing Orthodox Christian? I don't know. He grew up in, he's a KGB agent. Most of the Soviet Union were atheists. I don't know Putin's heart. He's done things that I like. He's done things that I would disagree with. People highlight the amount of Orthodox churches Putin has built, and I would also highlight the amount of mosques that have been built. Russia has also been on a campaign is basically just building religious structures. Do with that what you will. I wish we had somebody like Putin fighting on our side. But again, I don't know what's in his heart. Remember, before the Ukraine-Russia fiasco happened, he was on the World Economic Forum as one of the global leaders. He got taken down from that. Is he against it? Is he for it? I saw Putin and Russia. They went on the sort of CBDC over in China, the digital yuan, right when the war happened. Is this moving us closer towards it? I've seen, in Russia, they already have the digital scans to scan stuff in your hand and stuff like that. Is that moving towards, again, the fourth industrial revolution, a la Klaus Schwab, a la the Great Reset? I can't tell. I do support any Orthodox Christian. If he is a firm believing Christian, I support him. Somebody says Putin was installed by the West. I've seen that before. I've watched documentaries. I don't know the details about that. So if somebody says Putin is not doing best for his people, if only you knew how bad things really are. And that might be true. I am not an expert on that. So I'm kind of going to stay out of there. In regards to the second half of your question, Anonymous, why don't Orthodox Christians all move to a singular state like Utah? I think that's a little bit difficult given how people have lives, families, jobs. It's not so easy just to pick up and move. Although what is happening is there's certainly places around the U.S. where many Orthodox Christians are gathering. Arizona being one of them. Looks like Montana being another one. California has a strong Orthodox community. I know West Virginia. It seems like the ones in Tennessee and Florida are growing. Texas is growing quite a significant Orthodox community. And so from the people I've talked about, the goal would basically to build Orthodox communities all over the U.S., not just be geographically in one state, although politically that would make a lot of sense because you could pass more laws, you could defend your tradition much more easily if we were all in one geographical place, that we could then our votes would be counted much more so. So I wish we were, but I haven't heard of anybody talking about all focusing on one particular state. The conversations I've been a part of and privy to are more about kind of setting up about different hubs, however that may be, around the United States, where seemingly if you were an Orthodox Christian, you could move from one community to another community to another community without having to, be inside the B system. So as long as you're able to get fuel, get gas, travel, that you could move feasibly from one community to another. And ideally, each community would have a monastery within about an hour or so of it, so that something like what's happening in St. Anthony's in Arizona, where you have a neighborhood of Orthodox Christians that surround the monastery, that would be ideal all around the United States. If we had Orthodox Christians living and building neighborhoods around monasteries, that would be huge. That would be huge. So God willing, we can do that. God willing, we can continue to grow our community. I know I'm here in Indiana, so I'm right in the Midwest. We don't have a huge Orthodox Christian community, but it's fairly significant. We have I think 7 churches around the Indianapolis area, different sizes, different jurisdictions. But, our goal is to stay kind of tight knit, but it'd be nice to build larger and larger communities. We do have one Serbian monastery here in Indiana. But yeah, I think it's a great point, Anonymous. I think it's something that definitely should be thought about, maybe choosing a specific capital, right? If we have many hubs, there should be an Orthodox capital within the United States. And seemingly it might be Arizona because of how many Greeks that you have. St. Anthony's Monastery there. There's already a significant community there. But I think it's something that we should definitely think about, is having some sort of capital where if you are in the neighborhood of choosing where to live in the next decade or few, that you can then say, you know what, maybe I want to be here. And so it's something that we need to think about. I'm not sure where. I know for a while, many people were thinking that West Virginia might be an ideal state. And I don't know. So thank you for that. It's something to definitely think about. And I push that to all you guys listening, is to speculate and contemplate and think about what exactly we could do to move things forward as a collective, as a group. I think that would be great. So anyways, thank you very much for that dono chat. Let me just check all the super chats, make sure we're up to date on everything. Smash that like, guys. I want to give a very special thank you to everyone who's still here, and a very special thank you to everyone who's contributed. Thank you, William, for the $4.99 super chat. Thank you, First Person Q. Thank you, Crispy Rothschild, for renewing. Thank you very much, Ghostius, Frankie D, Jilly Bear, Mike 007, Maurice Smithville, Lawrence John, Marconius, Blue Skittle, the wife of his, the Orthodox Centurion, Highlander, Dr. Meme, Callmark, thank you so much and welcome, brother, to the community. Mr. Smirks, Muffhead, Rough Hands, Mella, Blue Skittle, and Alpha Numerica. Thank you so much. And on the side of Streamlabs, I want to give a very special thank you to Gary for the $100 super chat. Thank you, brother, for that very generous super chat. And thank you very much, Boneman538, for another $100 generous super chat. Thank you so much, Boneman538. God bless you, brother. I really appreciate that. And to all our donators over on Dono Chat, that included Kristen, Gary, and multiple anonymous Dono chats. Thank you very much, whoever that anonymous Dono chatter is. God bless you. Thank you very much. And that's going to do it, guys. I will be back. Next stream will be a sponsored stream on the theology of the Holy Spirit. I hope you guys will be ready for that. It should be a good one. We'll be talking about the mystery and the mystagogy of the Holy Spirit. I got to finish all that research. So I will see you then. As always, until next time, God bless. Oh, doesn't look like the internet's wanting to work now. I think you guys can still hear me. Okay. Come on. Anyway, guys, I guess we're going to just be sitting here until the yes. Yep. Internet's not wanting to work with me. So I'll try it one more time. Sorry, guys. I'm not sure what's going on with the internet. I can't even get off here. The internet is is not wanting to work, of course. Come on. Come on. I can't get the stream to turn off because the internet won't work. That's incredible. Incredible. So everything was working the entire time until it's time for me to get off the stream. Then the internet won't work. Amazing. Okay. All right. Well, guys, looks like I'm going to have to turn off the computer to shut off the stream. But anyways, thank you all so very much. I will see you next time. As always, until then, God bless.